So we're going to go ahead and get started as people come in. I see a lot of people listened to or thought about the email where we said that we may run out of seating space and are doing this remote. And so I'm glad that they were able to join us. We have over 600 people who signed up and registered. Now, I also know that not everybody's going to be with us all day. 5 hours out of a work day is a pretty hefty chunk. So for the group, just so you know, we are taping this. God, that makes me sound like VCR days, doesn't it? So we are recording it. There will be a record of it, and you can access it, I think, probably tomorrow night, probably tomorrow afternoon, you could be able to access it. So in case you missed something and that's what you want to do with your weekend, you are more than welcome to download that. So my name is Dawn Medley, and I serve as the Senior Vice President for Enrollment Management here at Drexel. And I'm so glad that you all have come to spend time with us and learn a little bit more about what we do and a little bit more about how we can work with you all. So today we're going to spend some time learning about the various areas of enrollment management, and I'll give you a little spiel later on about what the difference is in enrollment management versus recruitment, because that's one of my favorite things to talk about. But we'll spend some time, we'll give you a little bit of an overview. I have members of our team who will be talking about different things. They're going to walk you through some of our enrollment analytics. You're going to learn a little bit more about our outreach, how we actually recruit students and bring them onto campus. We'll also spend some time hearing from our UMAC counterparts and teams. They refer to themselves as our embedded leaders, but they help us execute a lot of the ideas that we have for how we want to recruit and what we want to do. And then also, we'll spend some time talking about our student and campus support. And I'm grateful Sabir is in the audience. When I was interviewing for this position and coming on board, Sabir has been my partner in crime. And so we feel like the students that we are recruiting and bringing to campus, we need to make sure that we're setting them up for success and then work closely with Sabir's team when they have needs or when there are issues that arise. So really enjoy that partnership, and I know he has a lot of his folks who've tuned in as well. So hopefully you'll have a broad overview of what we do, but what I really want you to leave with today is how to connect with us. How can we help you do your job better? Because we believe the entire campus is invested in the recruitment and retention of students. And so we want to make sure that you know who to call. And so my goal is that the entire enrollment management division, it doesn't matter who you reach out to, but they can get you to the right person. You can know the resources that are available to help you do your job and be really great. So I just need to let you know, it's been a heck of a year. So I started here last January 2nd. And so I'm just going to do kind of one of those Sophia off the Golden Girls moments where I say, picture this. So picture this. I was sitting on Long Island working at Stony Brook University and was contacted about the Drexel position. So I have a conversation with my husband, and I said, you know what? I said, Drexel. I said, national reputation, you know, this amazing experiential, learning experience. Gosh, it's in Philly. What do you think? Might that be a really kind of relaxing place to go and take a job and coast on out to retirement? Because I'm getting closer to retirement. So we have this whole discussion, and I was like, yeah, and Long Island really wasn't my cup of tea. And so we're like, yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm going to apply for this job. And so I applied for this job. So first thing that happens, FAFSA, okay? So first time in a long time, the federal government messed something up. And the FAFSA didn't launch, and it didn't launch, and it didn't launch, and we're still having the repercussions of that, right? So we saw a decrease in our first-year class because students were uncertain about the financial aid packages they could get. So we pivoted constantly, we changed strategies, we expanded opportunities, we tried to work on yield, we did everything we could, all right? So that was my first relaxing moment at Drexel. Second relaxing moment at Drexel is I arrived, and 2 weeks after I got here, we started talking. You all have been talking, okay? But it came to my ears, academic transformation. We're going to go from quarters to semesters. Okay, that makes a lot of sense in the recruitment world, and we'll talk about it. And we're going to do that, and we're going to re-examine our curriculum, and we're going to look at core competencies, and we're going to. That's a lot of work. And oh, by the way, Dawn, not only are you and Sabir working very closely when it comes to enrollment management and student success, but we want you to work really closely with the deans and with Paul and really kind of shape and structure this. Okay, so that was 2 weeks in. All right, so I got FAFSA going on, and I got academic transformation. Then we start talking about financial resiliency, okay? So how are we going to make sure that we're increasing net tuition revenue? What does that mean for graduate enrollment and transfer enrollment? And how are we doing those things? And really coordinating with the budget office. And so there's a whirlwind there. That's happening, right? And at this point, I'm only 8 weeks in. Anybody know what Fry means? Okay? John Fry, right? So John Fry, when you are looking at a position, I look. John Fry had 3 years left on his contract. He had been here for 14 years. We had this whole discussion, so I'm like, okay, so I can anticipate that John will be here 3 years till the end of his contract. Then we may have an interim, and then maybe somebody comes on board. That gets me to my 5 for retirement. Okay, no, that didn't work out either. Okay, so John decides that he's taking a different position. I bring in 2 new leaders, so you will meet them today. So onboarding them, so we had to talk about what is our organizational structure, what is our focus. A lot of you have heard me talk about our systems and our strategy and what we're trying to do with staffing. So going through 2 searches, spending time finding 2 new leaders, bringing them on board, and really setting that up. So that was a lot of stuff going on, and that's just in addition to my day job. Then we went through budget reductions. So really determining what we're going to do as far as the budget goes, how are we going to do, what are we going to spend, where are our priorities as an institution. And just so you know, those 2 new leaders, they started on the day of the town hall where we talked about the fact that we weren't going to match retirement benefits. So getting folks who were willing to come and take this journey with us when I could tell them it was going to be a difficult journey. So that happened. Trump. Okay, that's where we are right now. So this has been my year, okay? It has been probably, and I think most of you would agree, one of the most disruptive years in higher education at Drexel in a very long time. I think easily on par with COVID in the fact that it's been multiple things happening at multiple different times. So now we're working through, we had the 2-day cycle of do we have research grants and research dollars. We had a lot of students who were really freaked out about whether or not their federal financial aid dollars were going to be affected by the memo that we just got. Now we're seeing, all of the information coming about DE&I initiatives and how we're going to deal with that and how are we going to support our students and stay true to our mission as an institution in light of all these things happening. Okay? None of these things have been easy, and I can't stand up here and say that they're going to get easier as we go, but what I will tell you is I am so grateful to be at a place that has staff members who are willing to roll up their sleeves and to work through these things. And we'll talk about the things. We brought UART students on through this. We were the shelter for them when their institution failed. We've done a lot of really good work this year, but it doesn't mean that we're going to slow down in anything else we're doing. And so I'm grateful to you all for your partnership in wanting to come and learn more about this work. This was all in context of the demographic cliff. I mention it only because in presentations when I don't mention it, people will say, hey, and are you familiar with the demographic cliff? We are very familiar with the demographic cliff. We are very familiar with the fact that there are not more high school graduates coming. And so we'll talk to you a little bit about some of our strategies. So our division has 3 primary goals, okay? And so this is a little on the business side and a little less on the student focus, but we'll talk about it. The first one is to support the financial stability of the institution. And we do that not only in the way that we bring in students and we work with revenue, but we also took budget cuts, okay? So when you are the sales team for an institution, when you are the promotion team for an institution, when you have to travel, I just think it's important for you all to know that we were right in there beside you in taking those budget cuts, looking at our budget, looking at what we're spending and how we're doing, and how the choices we had to make will impact some of the things that you see. When we start talking about the fact that we've had a decrease in the scholarship dollars that we give out to students, that's directly linked to the budget cut. You know, we didn't want to cut scholarships to students, but if there is no money in our pocket, we can't give that money to a student. We also really wanted to focus on being student ready. So as we're going through this academic transformation, when faculty switch up curriculum, or when we see how this may impact, you know, our students going out on co-op, or when we start talking about, you know, opportunities for undergraduate research or study abroad, we want to make sure that we're delivering information to students that helps them be a good fit. So are we student ready? And that's not only in their recruitment, but also how we're helping with retention. And you'll see some of the team talk today about how we're trying to be nimble and support that to make sure that we're supporting students. And so back to that academic transformation, I joke with Paul all the time that I felt like for a while I was junior provost, because he was having a meeting, he'd be like, oh, well, you know, Dawn, you need to come, you need to come. And it has been amazing. And the other thing that I tell people all the time is if I joined Drexel 2 years ago, as these things were kind of ramping up, I think I would have been really eager to see them move quickly forward. But I think if I waited and I joined Drexel 2 years from now, I would be really disappointed that I hadn't been part of the academic transformation, because this is heady and exciting work. But jumping in right now with, you know, both feet and just landing kind of in the middle of that over the course of the last year and 6 months, it's been a lot, and I know it's been a lot for you all, but we're all rowing the boat in the same direction, and that's very exciting. But those 3 priorities lead to one goal, okay? Our one goal as a division is to increase the net tuition revenue of the institution. Now, I want you just to sit with a second, okay, and think about that, because a lot of you are going to go, whoa, that's a really, you know, my goal is student success, or my goal is student experience, or my goal is student support, or my goal is student efficiency. If we don't have solid net tuition revenue as an institution, none of those other things matter. None of those other things happen. So I love Alistair, he's in the back there. It doesn't matter how many dollars we bring in for research if we can't support the educational mission of the institution. Sabir cannot do his job if we don't have students who can afford to live in residence halls and who are supported academically. We can't provide tutoring services if we don't have solid net tuition revenue. And so if I have to boil it down to one goal as an institution, as a division, it's to increase our net tuition revenue. All the work we do leads to that. And I know that seems like a really kind of business, cold, you know, feeling thing, but when you have to distill, you get it down to that one drop. Everything that our team feels about this work is passionate, because it's all directly related to students, their experience, and their success. So don't take this goal as just some hard, you know, accountant, you know, numbers kind of thing, because that does not lessen the passion, the empathy, the compassion, the feeling that we have when we're doing our jobs. But that's the actual goal of what an enrollment management division is to do. So enrollment management versus recruitment, won't spend a lot of time on this. As I said, you all will have access to this. You don't need to feel to take copious notes because it will be available to you. But a lot of times when people think about enrollment management, they think about their own experience or their child's experience where somebody came to a high school or to a college fair and told their student about an institution. And so a lot of times we will have people come up and say, have you ever considered maybe going to high schools and telling them about the institution? Or, you know, my child got this mailer, are you sending out mailings to do this? And so people really only think about enrollment management in terms of actual student recruitment. And we're going to show you a little bit more what we do, because it's very important to us that we not only recruit students, but we recruit students who are going to retain. And so we'll show you some numbers about that and about why that's really important and why we make sure that they have a good experience. So the offices that reside within the enrollment management division are here. And what you will see is a lot of focus on different types of students and recruitment, but you will also see a lot of focus on how we provide services to students as well. And so we'll talk about some of these today. I know while 5 hours may seem like a long time, it's actually a really short time. And so if there's an area that you have particular concern or questions or those types of things, you're going to know the people that you can reach out to for that information. And with that, I will leave you so you can visit with Tom Gutman, who serves as our VP for Enrollment Analytics. I just want to real quickly make sure everybody knows we have an hour today at the end of the day from 4 to 5. Our goal is to be done talking at you at 4 o'clock. So that you have time. So let's say all of a sudden that Tina Marie really wants to have a side conversation with Giuseppe. She can pull him over and say, Giuseppe, I had a question about this, or you really want to connect with Helen maybe about an event that you want to hold. That's what 4 to 5 will be, so you can connect with us, but you don't have to stay the whole day and wait to connect with us from 4 to 5. We'll give you all of our email addresses. I bought business cards the old-fashioned way, but we want you to be able to reach out to us ongoing. And every time we do a presentation like this, I always want to be sure that you know this is not the last time that we can talk with you. We can talk to your divisions. We can talk to your offices. We're happy to do that. Always think of this as kind of the intro, okay? So this is like your Enrollment Management 101 class, and if you decide you actually want to pick up a minor in Enrollment Management or maybe the full major, let us know and we'll talk you through that, okay? So Tom, you are up.
Okay, let's do a quick mic check. Can everybody hear me okay?
No,
How about now?
Little louder.
Little louder?
Tom, give it one more shot.
All right, how about now?
We're good? All right, Tom,
Okay.
good.
All right, wonderful. If we could go to the overview slide, and Jeremy, one of the downsides of me not driving my slides is I can't actually see which slide I'm on at the moment. So we're gonna have to kind of feel our way through this. Okay. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Tom Gutman. I'm the Vice President for Enrollment Analytics within Enrollment Management. I have been at Drexel for just over 10 years at this point and have overseen the Enrollment Analytics team in the entirety of my time at the institution. My presentation today has 3 primary goals. First, I'm going to provide kind of an overview of what the Enrollment Analytics team does for Drexel and for Enrollment Management. I want to spend some time talking about this distinction between informing macro level decisions and micro level decisions. This has been a big area of focus for us this past year. And there's some exciting developments that I want to share with you all today on that. And then finally, I'll wrap by talking through enrollment projections and how they tie to some of the academic transformation work that we're undertaking as a community right now. If we could go to the next slide. First thing I want to do is just introduce the team. So Chris Griggs, our senior data scientist on our team, has been at Drexel, I believe it's just over 14 years at this point, so he has been at the institution longer than I have. Chris is one of the driving forces behind a lot of the modeling work that we do, and likely understands graduate admissions data better than almost anybody else at the institution. That has been his major area of focus over the years, in addition to some of the more advanced work that we're starting to do with text analysis and things of that sort. Sherry Wong is a data scientist on the Enrollment Analytics team who's been with the institution since 2019. Sherry helps with a lot of our first year modeling and also is responsible for our lead scoring model, our prospect scoring model, which I'll describe in a little bit more detail later on in the presentation. What I really appreciate about Sherry is she's the person that I go to whenever we make a change and we have to think through second and third order effects. So what might happen if we undertake a particular action within the context? She's really good at that. Hossein Ebrahimjad is a data scientist on our team who joined in 2021. Hossein has a PhD in engineering education. What I really appreciate about Hossein is that he brings a researcher's mindset to a lot of the work that we do, which was an area or a skill set on our team that was lacking a bit before he joined, and that I think has helped a lot of us as we think through our work. He primarily these days is collaborating with Steve Weber on curricular analytics work and trying to navigate some of the issues of curricular complexity. And then Garrett Powers has been with the enrollment analytics team for just under 2 years at this point, or just over 2 years, I believe. And Garrett is one of those people that if you give him a really tough analytical problem in a direction and say go, he will go. And I've been really impressed by the contributions that Garrett's been able to provide. He's also a master's student within the College of Engineering, and he's been bringing a lot of what he's learning in his coursework to our work and helping to inform it. So we can jump to the next slide. I want to give you all a sense of the team's portfolio at a high level. So first and foremost, one of the key things that we do as a team is we do a lot of data engineering and cleaning. We're at a point with our data infrastructure at the university where we can't necessarily just take data straight out of university data sources and then run models on it. That requires a certain amount of data engineering, feature engineering, and cleaning. So the team is doing a lot of that work with an eye toward consistency, toward really whatever application we're aiming to use it for. Layered on top of that, we do more simple analyses. And this is trying to understand what's happening in the admissions funnel. So the very basic version of that is how many applications do we have, admits and deposits and so on and so forth. But also what's happening in the admissions funnel before students take those big conversion steps. So event registration and website engagement and logging into the admissions portal, things of that sort. We also spend a great deal of time trying to gather contextual information. So one of the great things about working in higher ed is that there's a lot of publicly available data, whether it's from iPads or from other sources, that we can take advantage of and use to inform our work. And we spend a significant amount of time trying to digest that work and help inform our understanding of really where we fit in an overall marketplace. I think that's really important to keep in mind in this work, is that we are not operating in a vacuum. One of the downsides of iPads is that it is lagged, but we have sources of information from vendors that allow us to understand what's happening in the recruitment cycle in real time as it is unfolding. So layered on top of those simpler analyses, we get into the more advanced analytical work. This is not comprehensive. These are just 3 examples of what we do. But one example is our yield and financial aid modeling and the projection work that we do. That's extremely important for us as we're trying to balance budget constraints with enrollment goals and all of the things that we ultimately have to manage to. We use these predictive models to help inform our decision making. And it's, like I said, it's an extremely important part of the team's portfolio. Another thing that we do is prospect and lead scoring on an ongoing basis. So this really applies to students who haven't even applied to Drexel yet. So students who we've acquired their information either from a testing agency or from another firm, and we start to recruit and market to those students. The prospect and lead scoring is really important because if we want to deploy resources to directly recruit those students, those pieces require resources, and what we want to make sure that we do is deploy resources as effectively as possible. So we use that model to help inform those decisions. And then the final thing that I'll mention is that we do a great deal of enrollment forecasting in partnership with the finance office and with the office of the provost. One thing that I want to mention here is that these are not one-shot projects. These are things that we update and improve upon over time. We had, just to give you an example from the yield and financial aid world, we have a series of models that we develop that really handle pre-offer, or the pre-offer period. So before we actually offer students admission. We then have a set of models that we develop that really help inform the post-offer period. So once we release admissions offers to students, students will respond and act and take actions throughout the part of the recruitment cycle where we're trying to ultimately enroll them. We take all of that information and generate enrollment probabilities, and I'll dig into dig into that a little bit more later in the presentation. The other thing, and it's just worth kind of double underlining this, we spend a significant amount of time trying to understand the surrounding environment and how it affects Drexel. Like I said before, we are not alone in this marketplace. Lots of institutions are struggling, and lots of institutions are taking actions that we need to be ready to respond to in the moment. And then you have exogenous events too that we also have to respond to, understanding what moves those other institutions might make too. So for that reason, sense making of these data, interpretation of these data are just absolutely key and essential in this work. If we could go to the next slide. The way that I kind of boiled this down and what I would describe as our primary area of focus over the last, I'll say 9 years of my time, has been to help inform what I describe as macro level decisions. I won't go through all of these, but just to kind of give you all a sense of what I mean by that, I've listed a couple examples. So one of those examples is how likely are the students that we admit to enroll and to retain to the university? How much aid should we provide them? And those are actually two related questions, right? So what we do on the financial aid side, subject to our budget constraint, affects that first question, but again, striking that balance is really key. The other example that I want to provide is that one on the bottom in the middle. So if we make a really significant change to an aid practice, and an example of this from recent memory is Drexel Promise, we don't necessarily feel comfortable purely applying our existing modeling to that because there are so many other things kind of wrapped up in the financial aid process. Again, this is context and sense making, right? That are different when we put a radical change in financial aid in place. So we have a long history of providing financial aid for our transfer students, but what we had them do in historical years was file the CSS profile just like our first year students, and that is a barrier. So one of the interesting things about Drexel Promise, this program that we launched a couple of years ago, was that we provided automatic tuition discounts for students that came to us from local community colleges, so Pennsylvania, New Jersey community colleges. If you were planning to finish your associate's degree, it was a 50% discount. And we encourage you to file FAFSA, but you don't necessarily have to if that's a choice that you don't want to make. So it completely changes the way that students interact with the aid process. So in situations like that, what we will do instead of relying on modeling is that we'll do a break-even analysis. So what we'll do is we'll look at our past data and we'll say, this is the subset of students that this new policy or practice will affect. If we were to award them the way that we're proposing to award them, this is the amount of net tuition revenue we would lose. And then we need to get an understanding of what do we need to do to make up the difference. And if that number is reasonable, then we'll take the risk. Drexel Promise paid off ultimately, because the break-even analysis said if we enroll 6 or 7 more students, then it will break even and we will be able to earn more net tuition revenue. So that's, again, these are just examples of some of the work that we have done. What we have been transitioning to in the last year, if you wouldn't mind jumping to the next slide, please, is focusing on what I'm describing more as micro level decisions. The way that I've made sense of this and interpreted this is to try to help empower our colleagues to use our data to make better decisions in their day-to-day work. So the example I want to provide to illustrate this is that we are providing ongoing and iterative updates to our yield probabilities, just like we always have. But instead of having that information kind of sit with the enrollment analytics team, we are sending that information to Slate on an ongoing basis. So imagine if you are an admissions counselor or somebody who's spending their day recruiting students. You have an immediate decision when you log into Slate, which is our customer relationship management tool, or CRM, which is, how do you spend your day? How do you triage your time? Who do you want to engage with? So what we're going to be sending to Slate is demonstrated in the right-hand part of this slide. So what we've essentially done is we've taken our yield probabilities that we are generating daily and measures of engagement, and we're categorizing that based on high, medium, low, likelihood to enroll, high, medium, low, recent engagement. And what this essentially does is it breaks our admit pool into 9 groups, and the groups are not the same size by any means, but nonetheless, it gives you a mechanism for triage and priority setting. And what I would say is that this tool is useful for triage depending on the application that our admissions recruitment staff are using it for. So just for an example, if we are thinking about contacting parents, we might want to use these categories a little bit differently than if we were, say, trying to do outreach to individual students. So this is an example of something that we are really pushing toward, and something that I'm extremely excited about. And again, I want to emphasize, if we go to the next slide, these categories can change over time, depending on actions that students take. So just to give you examples of what that ultimately looks like, if a student registers for an event, or they make a scholarship appeal, or they engage on our website, that's information that we absorb into our models and return changes to our probabilities of enrollment. So just to illustrate what this looks like, so we were doing trial runs of this work last year. What you can see in this plot on the right-hand portion of the slide is one student that I polled, who I knew deposited on April 2nd of last year. And I just wanted to see, what did their enrollment probability look like as things happened in the admission cycle. So the range of dates here is from roughly March 1st to June 1st. And what you can see as we move from left to right is that this student's enrollment probability started pretty low, so close to 10%. Over time, that probability started to tick up, and it got all the way to 25% toward the end of March. Right before the student deposited, we started to see this uptick in the yield probability as the student took more and more action that we were able to derive signal from. So their probability went from 25% to almost 37.5% in a day on, we'll call that April 1st. On April 2nd, it went up again, and they deposited that day. The very next day, once the deposit is actually registered in our system, their probability shoots up to close to 80%. It's worth underlining here, I think this is a bit of an aside, but notice it didn't go to 100%. And that's because not everybody who deposits ultimately enrolls at Drexel. So what this tool can also be used for is to try to identify which students are likely to not come after they make a deposit, what we call in our industry melt. So over time, this student's enrollment probability dropped a bit until it spiked right around June 1st, up to close to 90%. All right, I'm going to shift gears on you all significantly if we could advance to the next slide. So everything that I just talked about is modeling work and data work that informs recruitment. One of the things that we're also responsible for is enrollment forecasting and projections. So this is something that we've been involved in really since I joined the institution, where we have collaborated with the provost's office and the finance team to try to gain a concrete understanding of what to expect for our undergraduate enrollment and revenue. And what I like to show to kind of demonstrate what this project ultimately looks like is this table that's at the bottom of the slide. So if you look at the rows of the table, I have what I'm calling entering cohorts. Cohort is a fancy name for a group of students who start at the institution at a particular point in time, right? So think first year class students who start in fall 2022, or transfers who started in 2021, just as examples. What we then do is over time, as you move to the right on a particular row, you're tracking that cohort of students' enrollment and revenue over time until you get to the point where it's not an actual anymore. You have to develop projections. That's precisely what we do. So for every single student, we calculate a probability that that student will be enrolled full-time, part-time, or on co-op in any given term. One thing I want to emphasize here, and I know it's in the slide, but just to underline it, it's not just fall terms. If I included winter, spring, and summer, the table would go off into infinity, so we don't need to do that. But ultimately, we're getting projections for our continuing students in terms of their enrollment and their revenue. And that's demonstrated in the orange part of this table. Right underneath that, we have assumptions for what our new student enrollment and revenue will ultimately be, right? So again, these are assumptions. What you can then do is you can take the projected continuing student enrollment in orange, the assumptions for new student enrollment and revenue in green, and I don't know why I picked purple, I just did, but if you join the orange and the green, you get the purple, which is total projected enrollment and revenue and assumed new enrollment and revenue. And so if we go to the next slide, there are two primary use cases for this work. The first is that it helps inform the university's long-term budget. I use the word inform very deliberately. It's not setting the budget, but what we're doing is we're helping to inform Helen and her team, again, what we think undergrad enrollment and revenue will be. And it also provides a good mechanism for us to do scenario planning. So if things change, what do we think the impact will be to the long-term budget? More recently, that scenario planning exercise has been quite important because it was used as the foundation for quantifying the enrollment and revenue benefits that we're anticipating for academic transformation. One of the primary premises of why we're undertaking that work is that we want to make our institution better for students at the end of the day. So when we were asked to try to translate that into enrollment impacts, this model came in pretty handy. So for those of you who have heard me harp on this, I feel like I say this in lots of meetings that I participate in, but in any enrollment and revenue modeling problem, you have four primary levers that you can pull. And when I talk about this, I'm talking about this on a cohort by cohort basis, right? So if I'm thinking about fall 2027 new first year students, that's really what I'm talking about here. So the four levers are as follows. Number one is initial head count. So how many students do you bring in? Number two is the initial discount rate and any subsequent discount rate for that cohort in future terms, because the discount rates are variable, just depending on who leaves the university or who might get Operation Graduation funding or whatever the case may be, those discount rates can change over time. The third lever is enrollment and retention rates across every single term. And then the fourth is gross tuition rate increases, because those have impact on both revenue and retention. If we go to the next slide, so the way that we were thinking about this is for academic transformation is that we think at a minimum it's going to affect two specific populations of students. The first is the first year class. We derived our estimates for what we thought the impacts would be based on previous cases. But what we wanted to be very mindful of is as Dawn alluded to, we're entering a pretty significant demographic challenge soon, like imminently. So what we didn't want to do was assume that we would enroll significantly higher numbers of students because of the academic transformation work. It's worth remembering from the UAC report and really the foundation of academic transformation that the whole idea of this is to try to enhance student flexibility with our academic programs and enhance the student experience, right? The story gets told ad nauseum at this point that it's easier sometimes for students to leave the university than it is to transfer between majors. So that's one of the things that we're trying to solve with academic transformation work. Overall, if I go back to the levers for enrollment modeling, I'm thinking about enrollment and retention rates as opposed to initial headcount from that change. So we identified two institutions as we were doing this work that had very similar context to ours in terms of calendar conversion being married with really significant curricular reform and change. And that one was Rochester Institute of Technology, and the other was Northeastern University. So both institutions, again, contextually are similar to us, especially in the moment that they underwent their calendar conversions. So Rochester Institute of Technology, when they underwent this work, saw a 1 percentage point increase in their retention rate to the second fall post-implementation, and a 2 percentage point increase in their graduation rates. Northeastern saw a bigger impact. There's a lot of things going on at Northeastern when they made their change. They saw a 2 percentage point increase in their retention rate to the second fall, and a 4 percentage point increase in their graduation rate, in their 6-year graduation rate. We didn't want to be as optimistic as the Northeastern case. We didn't want to be as pessimistic as the Rochester Institute of Technology case, so we took the average of the two cases. And that really translates to about 1.5 points on retention to the second fall and a 3 percentage point increase in graduation rates. And it's important to note, this is for cohorts of students that are not yet enrolled at Drexel. So we are assuming that new classes will retain better, and that's where the enrollment impact will come from, and then the associated revenue impact as well. To be honest with you, the revenue impact from that, especially in that first year, from the first year class, is pretty small. But as you start to layer more and more cohorts of students, it starts to build until you reach a new, what I like to call an enrollment steady state, where you have different levels of enrollment based on the fact that you've driven your retention and your graduation up. So if we jump to the next slide, we'll talk about the second population, which is transfer students. So these are students that transfer at some point in their academic journey. And our premise with assuming changes here is that, one, we're going to pull the headcount lever with this particular population. Our thought is that aligning our calendar with partner institutions, community colleges primarily, but we do get transfers from four-year institutions as well, and reforming our curriculum should ultimately make it easier for students to transfer here. That's both in terms of the semester to semester alignment, but also just purely in terms of being able to align our curriculum with other institutions and having things translate a little bit more easily than they currently do. Our premise here, or our thought, is that that will translate to increases in the number of transfer students that we are able to recruit. We're basing this based on our experience with Drexel Promise. So we put in a big program where we are having essentially just aid transparency for our transfer students, and we saw a pretty large response to that. So our thought is that we are going to increase our transfer enrollment by roughly 33 additional transfers per year. And again, as we build that population over time with additional cohorts of students, that the enrollment and the revenue impact just keeps getting larger. One thing I do want to point out, because I don't want it to come across as if I'm saying we're going to flip the switch on calendar conversion and then all of a sudden the transfer students will appear. Like, no, our groundwork for this is happening right now. Hillen Grayson from our team is going to get into that in more detail when he gives his talk, but this is not an assumption that this is just going to materialize because we're going to build the thing. We're going to start, we've really already started developing those partnerships now. All right, so just wrapping up, I want to convey this is not a comprehensive view of what the team does, but I do hope it provides a good overview. And again, I want to emphasize we're in a rapidly changing environment, as we all know. We joke on our team, both within enrollment analytics and within enrollment management, that wouldn't it just be nice to have 1 year of consistency, right? Like to have 1 year that looked like the previous one. And we just don't operate in that world right now. So in that environment, being able to make sense of things and interpret things is really important. There's also a tremendous amount of work left to do. We are not as far along as I'd like to be on graduate and online. That is going to be a major point of emphasis for us, especially as we wrap up recruitment of this year's first year class. So with that, happy to take any questions you might have to the extent that we can stay within time for the presentation. If you're more comfortable, or if you are on the live stream and you want to ask me a question via email, my email is there. You can also send me a Teams chat. So I'll be monitoring that as we go. But otherwise, really appreciate the time, appreciate you all listening, and again, happy to take any questions.
So what we can do quickly, so we do not have the capability to take questions from the YouTube live stream. So I would encourage folks who are on the live stream to email Tom if you have those types of questions. But we could take some questions from members of the audience who are actually here in person. If anybody has, we already have one. So we should have there's a couple of microphones right there. All right, and Tom, can you hear us?
I can hear you. It might be helpful to relay the question to me.
They're going to have a microphone, so
okay,
hopefully
great.
You can hear it.
Can you hear me?
Sure can.
I was just wondering about outside forces and how you factored those in. Like, for example, the fall 2033 cohort or individual headcount. Those are the kiddos that started kindergarten during COVID, and a lot of people kept their kindergartners home for an extra year. So that class is going to be a lot smaller, but then fall 34 will be larger. So are those all sort of factored into that?
I would say not directly into the assumptions, but anytime we go into a recruitment cycle, we are considering that type of context. So I would say, I think a better example of how we're using, a better example for me in terms of illustrating what I really mean by this is, last year with the FAFSA situation. So that was something that we became aware of in May of 2023. And we started putting things in place to try to be ready for that. Unfortunately, just the sheer force of that shock kind of overwhelmed us. But it's a really good point. I do think that it's worth considering that in terms of our long-term assumptions. I will say one of the things about higher ed is that it is a pyramid, right? Just in terms of the structure of the marketplace. And the institutions at the tip of the pyramid usually can weather shocks where there might be fewer students in one cohort and more in another. I think one of my kind of overarching thoughts about the direction that we need to go is to make sure that we're in the region of the marketplace that can weather those types of things. But it's a really good question.
So Tom, I just want to clarify something you said. You said we were overwhelmed because of the FAFSA. I want to be really clear. I think that Drexel and the enrollment analytics team and the ability to adjust, I don't think they were overwhelmed. What I would say is we didn't have the financial resources to support those students who were uncertain about their aid packages in the way that some of the institutions who are completely need blind were able to do. And so if an institution, is able to 100% fund their entire first year class, the FAFSA didn't really affect them because they weren't really concerned and they knew they could do that. So I have a good friend who works at Vanderbilt, and really they had no impact because they could afford to do that. We were in the situation where we don't fund students at that level as they're coming in, and so that's why I think we were overwhelmed by the FAFSA, but I would never say that Tom and his team were not prepared to help us weather that storm. So I just wanted to be real careful about that word you had used, Tom.
Thanks.
All right, other questions from anybody within the audience here? All right, then we will move on to our next segment. And our speaker will need to run from the back of the room. All right, so next up we have Helen Grayson, Jr.
Yeah, I'm just gonna stand. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Dawn, and thank you, Tom, for the quick intro here. All right. So just a quick introduction. So Dawn, in her introduction, had mentioned her ability to bring on 2 new leaders in her first year here. I'm fortunate to be one of those 2 new leaders that she was referencing. I've had a good chance to meet many of you that I can see here in the auditorium, and there's a good number of you that I don't think I've had the opportunity to meet yet. So whether it's during the break today, the time that we have to connect from 4 to 5 after today's summit, or in the weeks ahead, I'd like to make as many connections as possible, and I'll talk about why that is here over the course of my time with you today. The first thing that I want to do is just provide an overview of the people that I work closely with on a daily basis in my role overseeing admissions and outreach for the Enrollment Management Division. So here you'll see folks that are responsible for recruiting graduate students to the institution, transfer students to the institution, first-year students, working with our strategic partners in the local community and supporting enrollments through their employees. Sean McGeehan's team that oversees operations and processing a lot of application materials for both undergraduate and graduate students, as well as Monica Scarrato, who oversees admissions for Salis up in Elkins Park, and then Hillary Mitnick's team, who really supports some of that foundational work that Tom was talking about as we're working towards realizing the full benefits of academic transformation in the years ahead, and I'll talk some more about that. But I do want to take a moment just to acknowledge this group and thank them for all their support in my first almost 4 months being here. They've definitely helped me get up to speed as fast as possible. I've learned a lot. There's still a lot to learn, but we're running towards a lot these days, so my thanks to this group. I want to start by just providing a brief overview of some key metrics that we look at, some key terms that we throw around the office on a regular basis. So if you're somebody that hasn't spent a lot of time around enrollment management or recruitment, some of these terms might not be as familiar to you. Lead generation is one that you'll hear about quite a bit. That is really how we're building our various funnels for the different groups of prospective students that we're aiming to enroll, whether that be at the undergraduate level, graduate, through strategic partnerships and transfers. There's a number of ways that we do that. Some of them are here. I won't get too far into the weeds, but that's just when we talk about lead generation at a high level, that's what we're talking about. Conversion rates. What you'll see on the right side of the screen is that funnel. Conversion rates are essentially what percentage of students, prospective students, are we converting from one stage of that funnel to the next. What we aim to do is really maximize our conversion rates at every stage of the funnel. And I'll get a little bit deeper into that. Yield rate is a term that gets thrown around a bit, and I will thank those that are in the media. I think they've picked up on yield rate and its importance in recent years. For a long time, they've really just been focused on application counts and admit rates. And then retention and graduation rates. So back to one of Dawn's earlier slides when she had showed enrollment management versus recruitment. A lot of what I'm gonna dive into here for my time is really gonna focus on recruitment, but there is a retention and graduation rate component to our work here in enrollment management, and that's something that we keep top of mind even through the recruitment process. And I'm gonna get into how that's really become a bit of a strategy shift for us, particularly on the first year side, but really holistically throughout the division. Really quick on the right-hand side, just to walk you through that funnel and just to give you a brief overview in terms of definitions for some of these different populations. Prospects are essentially cold leads. They are records that we have acquired information for to recruit to Drexel through a number of different paths, but they have not taken any action to express interest in Drexel University. That is the key distinction between the first group and the second group. Inquiries are essentially prospects that have raised their hand or demonstrated some behavior to say, I'm interested in Drexel. That could have been spending a certain amount of time on our web pages, and we're able to collect that information. They could have engaged with a digital ad that our colleagues in UMAC worked to put out there and promote. They could have registered for an event or engaged with our team as they're traveling and doing in-person recruitment across the globe. The next stage, I'm pretty sure we're all familiar with. It's the applicant stage. So then at that point, they've submitted an admission application, whether it's for undergraduate or graduate admission. Then we get to a point in the funnel where we really have control as an institution and as an admissions office for the various units, and that's the admit stage. That's an area that I'll dive into a little bit and how some of our strategies changed this year and moving forward in later slides. Deposits, so those are the students that we've admitted that have put down a deposit to hold their spot in the class, and then enrolls. Some of you might be saying deposits and rolls. I've heard them used interchangeably. I thought they were the same thing. Tom, on his one slide, had made the comment that not every student that submits that deposit shows up here on campus or shows up for enrollment in that online class. That is the difference between somebody who is deposited at Drexel versus somebody who is actually enrolled at Drexel. So where we have yield rate, that is the percentage of students that convert from that admit population to that deposit population or enroll population. It can be calculated differently depending upon who's doing the analysis or the institution or what we're trying to articulate. There's another term that you won't see here on the left side of the slide that is referred to as melt rate. Melt rate is the number of students that actually disappear from the deposit stage of the funnel to the enroll stage of the funnel. I'll talk a little bit about some melt prevention strategies in the rest of my time here. So I want to start out talking about elements of our work that don't necessarily live in any of the traditional admission units that some of you might be familiar with. A lot of this work is coordinated by our colleagues in UMAC, but there's a very strong partnership there across the divisions and across the units to ensure that we're putting on the best events and visit experiences that we possibly can for our prospective students. I see Jackie Hopkins back here, or in the back of the auditorium, so a shout out to Jackie for overseeing that unit in UMAC. Just a walkthrough of some of the different types of events and visits that we do here for prospective students. We have our daily visit program. And I think a lot of folks think about that in terms of prospective first-year students that are visiting campus here in Philadelphia. But we also have graduate students that are coming through our doors. We also have prospective transfer students that are coming through our doors. We also have international students, not as many of them that are making it to University City or Elkins Park to explore possible admission or enrollment, but we do have students from all across the country and all across the world that are coming through our doors interested in possibly enrolling at the university. And what we have to keep top of mind is how are we providing the best experience possible for all of these different populations when they make it here to campus to try to build as much affinity for those students as we possibly can. A daily visit program or volume here at the university can range anywhere from a handful of prospective students on any given day to a couple hundred prospective students on any given day, depending upon the traffic that we're seeing. Next, we have open house events, and I'll say there's really two high-level versions of these. There's the ones that live at the recruit stage. So if you go back to that funnel, that would be an open house event that's geared towards any population before they get to that admitted student stage in our funnel. So at that point in time, those programs are really geared towards providing as much high-level, holistic information about the university that we possibly can, targeted towards that particular population. So an open house event for prospective graduate students is gonna have different themes and different content than an open house event for prospective first-year students, and that would even change a little bit more if we're doing an event possibly for prospective transfer students as well. Then we have our open houses at the yield stage. So that's when we're trying to court admitted students to choose Drexel over, our competition that's out there in the marketplace. For those of you that haven't heard my full introduction in the past, I did get my start in higher education on the sidelines of a basketball court, which I will say, I have a competitive streak that runs in me. I learned a lot in those days, a lot about building teams, a lot about developing teams, and really cutting my teeth in terms of recruiting and building relationships. But it's that competitive streak that I think still runs in me, and that's where those yield programs really come out. And we're trying to figure out how are we distinguishing ourselves, how are we distinguishing our programs compared to the other institutions that folks might be considering. Virtual events is one that you might be wondering why we're bringing these up. And I will tell you, if you remember, if any of you worked in higher ed during COVID, you remember basically everything was virtual at that point in time, not just our meetings, but our recruitment programming, our yield programming. We're still doing virtual events. The biggest reason that we're doing that is to provide access and provide an equitable experience to students that might not have the means to make it all the way to University City. You think about our students abroad from other countries, but you think about students that live in Southern California right now, that have bigger things going on in their daily lives than figuring out how to get on a plane to come all the way across the country to visit Drexel. We have virtual programs in place for students like that to engage with us as well, to be able to provide that access. One thing that we're seeing industry-wide in enrollment management and college admissions is a shift in when prospective students are conducting some of those visits, particularly on the first-year side, but for other subpopulations as well. We're seeing more students wait until they find out what institutions they've been admitted to start conducting their visits. And that's been a bit of a shift that we've seen over the last several years across the profession. We're also bringing a renewed intentionality to programming off campus and outside of the Philadelphia and tri-state area as well. So this is an effort that we're partnering with some folks in advancement and some other units across the Drexel community to bring Drexel to prospective students. At this point in time, we're really piloting it with a yield goal in mind. So we're looking to stand up some regional programming across the country for admitted students Again, it's a way for us to meet them where they're at in their backyard, as opposed to requiring all of them to come to University City. And then counselor programming. That's an area that we've had a number of conversations internally about, and that's an area that we'll look to expand our programmatic efforts in the months and years ahead. Again, some of our focus on the event side, building affinity with every program or visit opportunity that we have, being student-centric. I know some of you might have seen or heard messaging from me directly or from some other folks, whether it be in UMAC or enrollment management, about some shifts to some of our programming this year. And a lot of those shifts are because we're trying to make our programming more student-centric. So I just want everybody to kind of have that in the back of their mind as to what's driving most of the shifts around some of our programs. Again, it's the opportunity for us to show Drexel, not just talk about it. And when we talk about our programming, we also have to remember a lot of times prospective students, especially on the first year side, aren't just coming by themselves, they're bringing family members. So we have to look at providing a visit experience that's impacting the entire sphere of influence for our prospective students. And just to put a note out there that this is an iterative process. I know that there's been a decent amount of change when it comes to our programming just in the last calendar year. There's likely to be some additional change in the years ahead. Again, it's an iterative process. We want to make sure that we're making changes that are student-centric, collecting feedback, and then tweaking our efforts accordingly moving forward. So the next area that I want to dive into is graduate admissions and graduate recruitment. So a brief overview for those of you that might not spend too much time in this space. Graduate recruitment is typically program specific. If anybody has a master's degree or an advanced degree, you'll remember how your search to choose your master's program in that institution differed probably very significantly from your college search when you were pursuing a bachelor's degree. I remember being 16, 17, 18 years old. I didn't really have a good sense of what I wanted to do, what I wanted to major in, what I wanted to go on and be as a career professional at that point. I will tell you, that kind of mindset and behavior has not changed in today's generation. Many 16 and 17-year-olds don't know at that point in time what they want to go on to do. The difference at the graduate level, you know what you want to do. You know the area of academic interest that you really want to level up in, and that drives a lot of your search at the graduate level. Faculty mentorship is another key piece as folks are navigating their graduate recruitment process, their graduate admission process. Prestige of program is definitely something that prospective students will look at, and that is something that we are aware of on our side as well as we're putting together our recruitment strategies. Expertise and focus of the faculty in those departments. Again, some of our graduate students have very niche focus and interest, and they want to make sure that they're identifying programs and faculty that have common interests that they can learn from. Research opportunities, we talk a lot about research, I think, across the university. A lot of times folks think about undergraduate level research, but graduate level research is very key, or a key driver in their college search journey as well. And then outcomes and value proposition. That is something that I'll touch on not just here, but you'll see me touch on it on multiple slides. Similar to at the undergraduate level, folks want to know that they go get that master's degree, that certificate, that professional doctorate or advanced degree, that there are strong outcomes from others that have earned a similar credential before them. And you know, it's on us to talk them through the value proposition as they're navigating their search. Some initiatives that we've launched from enrollment management or in partnership with colleagues at UMAC or other units across the university, the pillar programs. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about these right now. My colleague Nadine, I think, is going to touch on these a little bit later, maybe a lot of it later. Segmented messaging, I will say, when we're traveling across the globe recruiting prospective graduate students, the team has to be equipped to talk about all of our offerings university-wide. However, when we're standing up electronic messaging campaigns, whether they're via email, whether they're via SMS. We do know, because students, again, are very program specific in their intent and their goals for what they want to study, we need to be able to factor that into our messaging and how we're engaging them. And that is a shift in some of our recruitment and marketing efforts that we are working on right now to enhance how we're cultivating and converting students through the funnel on the graduate side. Strengthening and expanding strategic partnerships. So one of those individuals that I put on one of my first two slides there, Bill Friel, who oversees the strategic partnerships team. Bill oversees a team that's working with a lot of employers and partners, not just in the primarily in the tri-state area, but some of those companies are national and international, and working on supporting enrollments through those employers. And Bill's team does a phenomenal job, not just going to those employers and working with their HR units, but attending conferences across the country where we know we're going to be able to recruit folks to Drexel's programs. Another initiative that some of you might have heard about, some of you might be involved in this work depending upon the unit that you're in, is our move towards implementing the CAS application, or centralized application services, for programs at the university. So for those of you that are not familiar with CAS, the best way to draw an analogy is it's essentially the common application for graduate admissions. However, there is not just one version of CAS. There are versions of CAS for programs, for some of our niche programs, but there are some that are a little bit more broader in their application. So we have started exploring implementing CAS with some of our partners on the academic side of the university to date. And then one of the big wins that I think we've had recently on the graduate recruitment and graduate admissions front is really starting to adopt this one-team mentality. So I don't think it's any surprise to anybody that we've been working very closely with the team up at Elkins Park in Salis, and their programs are all at the grad level or post-bac level. Our strategic partnerships team has historically been recruiting for graduate level programs, and then we have Angela Montgomery's team that has obviously been leading that work in a central fashion for years. As we get closer to this merger, we need to be prepared for all of those units to be able to recruit for all of the programs, regardless of where they're housed. Whether they're housed here at University City, they live up at Elkins Park, or they're online programs. So we just had a full day training with all of the respective teams that are recruiting at the graduate level. We even had some folks from UMAC there as well last Tuesday, and we even brought in some folks from our transfer and undergraduate teams just to really strengthen and reinforce how we're cross-training folks across the division to be able to speak to all of the different offerings and the processes when it comes to graduate admissions and recruitment. All right, we also do a good bit of work with non-traditional populations. This is where I'll do some call out for international recruitment and international enrollment. That is an area that there's some renewed intentionality coming to how we're developing a holistic strategy around international recruitment and enrollment for the university. We will be launching a search for a position to centralize kind of that focus for international recruitment and admissions here in the weeks ahead. Online enrollments, just did a brief touch on some of our graduate programs that are in the online space. We also have some undergraduate programs that have an online modality, and happy to see Tina Marie here because we've been working very closely with her, and we'll continue to do so in the days and weeks ahead on continuing to build out strategy around how we can really grow and maximize our enrollments in the online space. We're also bringing some renewed intentionality to how are we serving adult learners, and how are we serving folks that have some college education but don't have a bachelor's degree yet. Less than half of Americans have a bachelor's degree. There's opportunity out there for us to provide a higher education to individuals in ways that are non-traditional from how we've operated in the past. So we are developing strategies on looking to maximize those efforts as we speak. Some of the initiatives that we've undertaken in this place just in the almost 4 months since I started, on the international side, aligning our in-person recruitment and travel efforts in global markets that have high rates of student mobility from those countries to come study in the United States. That's both for undergraduate and graduate level admissions, but also looking at doing so in areas where there are strong economies, where we know those students are going to have some ability to afford the Drexel education as well. Identifying opportunities to grow the funnel, as I just said, for prospective adult and online students. And then, I just gave Tina Marie a shout out here and our colleagues over in Goodwin as we continue to grow our efforts there. Just a quick highlight of some of the things that we pay attention to when we're talking about international recruitment. We pay very close attention to where the majority of international enrollments are coming to the United States. There's a lot of narrative out there about the drop-off or the decline in students coming from China to the United States to study higher education, whether that's at the bachelor's or the graduate level. However, when you look at this, you'll still see that they have the largest critical mass of prospective students coming to the United States for a higher education. So just because fewer of them might be looking to come here doesn't mean that there's still not a large population of prospective students there for us to engage, and that's an area that we're developing strategy around now. India, I definitely think there's been plenty of news there. No surprise that they're the second largest driver of international students coming to the U.S., and they actually just surpassed China recently. They are the top sender of graduate students to the United States as well. So trust me when I say we pay very close attention, not just to these top two countries, but to some countries that are farther down on this list as well, identifying opportunities and alignment between our academic offerings and what the interests are of prospective students in these regions. All right, moving on to transfer admissions. So this is where I'm going to start to talk about some of our undergraduate efforts and point back to some of the points that Tom Gutman talked about during his time. A brief overview of transfer admissions and how students are navigating that search. There are some similarities. Transfer students are very interesting when you look at their behaviors and how they navigate their search, because some of their behaviors mirror graduate students. They have a pretty good idea of the academic program they're interested in. And that's because they've spent some portion of time and they've studied some number of classes to have already established a bit of a foundation of their higher education. So they have a better sense when they're navigating their college search than a high school junior does in most cases in what they want to study. Affordability is a big piece that drives transfer students when they're navigating their search, and I'm going to touch on some of the initiatives that we have there in that space. Location, typically a little bit farther down the list, but definitely a trend that we have seen post-pandemic in the transfer market. Students that start at an institution farther from home and look to transfer to an institution closer to home. So that's also something that we pay attention to and we factor into our recruitment efforts and our strategy. Experiential education is still, so this is where it shifts kind of from something that might be similar to a graduate student navigating a graduate admission process to an undergraduate admission process. The experiential education, students are still interested in undergraduate research, even after they change institutions. They still have an interest in studying abroad. They're still interested in participating in a co-op after they transfer to Drexel. Experiential education is something that we still have very strongly, we feature very prominently in our messaging when we're working with transfer students and their advisors at two-year schools across the country. Student life and co-curricular opportunities, they still want to be able to partake in the same offerings that a student that comes to Drexel through a traditional first-year pathway will want to do so. They want to get involved in clubs and organizations. They want to find that sense of community. That typically is a leading factor for why students are transferring from one institution to another. It can have to do with location, But a lot of times it's because they didn't find that community that they thought they were going to find at the first institution. And that's something that we're promoting in our admissions and recruitment efforts to this population. Outcomes, again, that's a big one, as well as the value proposition of a Drexel education. Tom touched on the Drexel Promise. For those of you that are not familiar with the Drexel Promise, that's a 50% discount for students that have earned their associate's degree from a community college across the country. So when you look at the key factors on the left side, and you just let what the Drexel Promise is and what it can mean to a transfer student, right? You think about affordability. You think about access. You think about value proposition. Drexel Promise is a huge advantage that we have competitively in the transfer marketplace. Another new initiative that some of you might be familiar with, others maybe not as much. Prior to my arrival here in October, Enrollment Management and in partnership with some other folks across the university secured a grant through the American Talent Initiative. And that grant is supporting a new initiative where we are launching a direct admission pathway with the Community College of Philadelphia. A brief explanation on what this direct admission pathway is and how it operates. So essentially, if you think about a student that's from a very low socioeconomic background here in Philadelphia, and they graduate from high school, or they're in their senior year of high school, they've identified Drexel as a school that they want to attend for higher education. However, we don't have the financial resources to fully fund that student's educational experience at Drexel. So what that means is they could be the valedictorian in their class, or they could just be a very admissible student when it comes to academics. However, we know that we are unable to provide them a financial aid offer to where Drexel is going to be affordable for them to enroll in their first year. So what we do is when we inform these students that we're not admitting them for admission through the traditional first year pathway, we are also steering them to our colleagues over at the Community College of Philadelphia and telling them that should they spend their time there and earn their associate's degree, that we will directly admit them back to Drexel after they've completed that part of the pathway, and they will come to Drexel by way of the Drexel Promise. So for those students where the cost of a higher education, specifically a Drexel education, is a barrier for them when they graduate from high school, we are making their path to a Drexel degree far more affordable through this initiative, and also supporting our colleagues at the Community College of Philadelphia and really strengthening the partnership between the two institutions. Beyond the partnership with the Community College of Philadelphia in this new initiative, we're also working on strengthening our relationships with community colleges within 100 miles of campus. Now, I will tell you that does not mean that April's team is actively on the campus of every community college if you drew a 100-mile radius around Drexel or Philadelphia right now. We are starting on revisiting and renewing all of our dual admission agreements with those that are closest to Drexel and those that historically have sent us the most applications and enrollments to Drexel. However, simultaneously, we are beginning to explore strengthening and building some partnerships with some larger community colleges and two-year institutions a little bit farther from campus. So our team will be on the campus of Montgomery College in the months ahead. They'll be on the campuses of Northern Virginia Community College in the months ahead. So it's a two-pronged approach. The team is working on both strengthening our relationships and our transfer admission efforts here in the tri-state area close to campus, but we're also looking at how can we expand and grow those efforts at the same time. We're working on making Drexel a more transfer-friendly institution. You heard Tom say it, that sometimes it's been easier to transfer out than transfer within Drexel. I will tell you, one of the most exciting things on the transfer admission and transfer recruitment front is there are benefits to academic transformation that we're not going to be able to fully realize for another 12, 18, 24 months. The big one will be once we get to the semester calendar and we're not having to do the conversion for this is how many semester credits you have, how does that translate to quarter credits? That's a barrier that we have to enrolling a transfer student that many other schools in the country don't have right now. But again, we're not going to have a perfect solution for that for at least another 12 to 18 months. We're also working on improving and streamlining our transfer credit evaluation process. So one of the other things that factors into affordability for a prospective transfer student is knowing how much time they're going to have to spend at the institution they end up enrolling at as a transfer student. And a lot of that is driven by how many of the credits they've already earned transferring to that institution and counting towards their major once they transfer to that institution. So what we're working on currently is centralizing some of the transfer credit evaluation process. That is to put us in a position to turn around the transfer credit evaluations in some cases on a quicker timeline than what we've been able to do historically. The long goal that we have is to be able to provide a transfer credit evaluation for a student before they ever decide to apply for transfer admissions to Drexel. That's really where we start breaking down barriers for admission and enrollment at Drexel, particularly for the transfer population, is when a student can go online and request that transfer credit evaluation, and we can show them exactly how their courses are going to transfer in, how they're going to count towards graduation, and then drive them to apply and eventually enroll at Drexel. One of the things that ATI grant has afforded us the opportunity to do is partner with a company that's going to bring great efficiency to how we're able to scrape some of that course information off of transcripts and use that to even further speed up the transfer credit evaluation process and just generally how we're processing transcripts and admission materials across all of our various processes. I'm sure some of you were probably wondering, is he ever going to talk about first-year admissions? So we're here. So Dawn said it, right? She got here a year ago. FAFSA happens. It didn't just hit us hard, it hit the profession hard, hit the industry hard. And the team's working tirelessly right now to build the first-year class back to what it was before the FAFSA fiasco. Some key themes in how a prospective student is navigating their college search when they're applying for first-year admission and how we're supporting them. We're really supporting them university-wide. Again, 16, 17, 18-year-old, more of them don't know what they want to study or major in than do. So we've got to provide messaging that spans the entire university, that covers all of our schools, colleges, and programs at a higher level. We're not as able to get into program-specific messaging until they've been admitted, and I'll come back to that. Brand recognition. This is another point that I am just going to tease here, and I'm going to leave this for my colleague Craig to dive deeper in on when he gets up here in a little bit. Less program-specific messaging is being leveraged at the recruit stage. So go back to that funnel on one of my first slides. Before we admit a student, the messaging that we're providing is very university-wide. It is more about brands. Once we admit a student, we're able to get into more academic-specific messaging. And that's where we leverage it, is at the admitted student or that yield stage of how we're engaging prospective first-year students. There are elements of it that can get dropped in at earlier stages of our messaging and recruitment efforts. It just doesn't happen as frequently, because when we first get a record that enters our system, it could be from when they took their PSAT as a junior in high school. And they thought that they wanted to be, I see Paul in the back, so I'll use, engineering or something adjacent to that space as an example, right? And then they took the AP physics class, and 2 months into senior year, they're like, I don't think engineering's in my future, right? Business might work though. I'm liking AP Econ right now. So for us to hit them with too much messaging that might be focused around the AP physics course or the engineering academic interest that we captured at the point of their PSAT is not going to serve us well if we provide them too much of that messaging after they've changed their mind and decided they want to study in another area. So that's where we have to strike that balance on the first year side, different from how we're conducting messaging to our graduate students, prospective graduate students. Experiential education, again, this mirrors a lot of how we're messaging to transfer students as well. Students want to know that they're able to conduct research. They want to know that they can go study abroad. And of course, they want to hear about co-op, right? But it's a holistic approach to how we're messaging experiential education to our prospective students here at Drexel. More about student life and co-curriculars, and then again, outcomes and value proposition. This is another area where we've aligned some of our travel efforts with where we are building our funnel at the higher level of the stage. I will tell you, for a first-year class of 2850, we're starting with a funnel of several hundreds of thousands of records. That is what we're managing at the top of the funnel and getting it down to a class of 2850. I say that because the alignment of recruitment travel is not to say that there was misalignment before, but it's really just to draw attention to the fact that we can't be everywhere for all of those students. There's too many of them for us to engage on the road because our resources are limited. So now we're being very key and strategic and aligning where the team's traveling with where we're really strategically building our funnel across the U.S. and internationally. On that front, there are opportunities, sometimes you hear the saying, less is more. And I know the team in my first few months has heard me say, more is not always more. Sometimes we need to find the efficiencies. But we did have some opportunities to expand our recruitment efforts in person this year on the first year side. And, hats off to Melissa and the team. They did over 200 more college fairs in the fall of 2024 than the team was able to do in the fall of 2023. And that's no small feat. So hats off to Melissa and the team for really getting out there and hammering the road. And now when you see that and you hear me talk about that, one caveat to point out is the fruits of that labor won't all be realized in the class that shows up on campus this fall. Because not every prospective student that Melissa and her team are engaging are high school seniors. Some of those students are high school sophomores and juniors. So some of those students that we're building affinity with and we're building relationships with, they can't even hit submit on the Common application yet. You heard me talk a little bit about focusing or shifting some strategy and how we're working on things. One of the key messages that you'll hear when it comes to strategy, particularly on the first year side, is focusing more on enrollable students versus admissible students. So in the example that I provided on the direct admission pathway with CCP, I provided an example of a student that is admissible. However, that student likely was not enrollable, and that's because we wouldn't be able to provide that student a financial aid offer that would make Drexel an affordable experience for them. So in some of the shifts that we made in who we're choosing to admit and how we're working on cultivating our funnel, I'll give you a early win this year. So in our early decision pool, where we released decisions back in the middle of December, our admit rate for that pool came down by about 17 percentage points compared to last year. And now if you've been a part of previous presentations that myself or Dawn or some others have done, you've heard a message similar to, we're gonna be admitting fewer students, right? And this was a case where the admit rate came down. However, the yield rate, right, so remember the number of students that we admitted that have deposited here at Drexel went up 20 percentage points year over year. And what that results in is almost an identical number of actually deposited students point in time year over year. So that's how we're making some strategic shifts in how we're navigating our processes and our decision making on the first year side, and we're seeing some early wins. Another thing, just for folks to be aware of, is, when I first started this work, and I know the same was for Dawn and some others, the technologies that we had were not awesome. They were pretty archaic. I used to have to build a travel schedule by phone calling hundreds of high schools in my territory and coordinating them all on a legal pad or an Excel spreadsheet. Today we have systems. Yeah. Today we have systems that make a process like that much easier. However, there are emerging technologies that make a lot of our work more efficient and provide us the opportunity to more thoroughly engage and cultivate a funnel that's starting with hundreds of thousands of prospective students. So if you have not been on the Drexel Central web pages recently, and you go there sometime in the next couple of days, you might see an AI-powered chatbot on some of those pages. There's a company that we are partnering with, and we are one of their early adopters, to leverage a tool that is truly powered by AI and not just the catchy phrase AI, where it's really powered by our team on the back end, updating a question and answer bank, to better serve students. And it's, again, could we, if we had unlimited financial resources, hire people to do some of that engagement? Yes. But there's still limitations to how many hours in the day we can work. We have time differences between where we are on the East Coast and students that are international or students that are within the US. If anybody has a high school age student, I know I do at home, they're up at all hours of the night, right? Our team works hard, but our team is not online at 3 a.m. to respond to messages that are coming in on the website. So that is where we're looking to leverage some emerging technologies to better support students and better support our team in enrollment management to make sure that we're doing best in our recruitment and enrollment efforts. I also touched on the one technology and company that we're working with that's supporting transfer credit evaluations and scraping transcripts. That work is really focused in the transfer space right now. We're going to look to hopefully expand that effort to provide some support and efficiency to the processing of first year and graduate level application documents in the months and years ahead as well. And we're constantly evaluating other possible partners and suitors in the ed tech space to work with. And hats off to our colleagues in UMAC that have really led some of the research and implementation efforts with some of those teams as well. One thing that I just want to circle back to on the first year side, Dawn kind of ended her slide with the demographic cliff. Have we heard of it? Yeah, we've heard of it. We've been talking about it for quite some time now. This is the most updated research from WICHE, which is the Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education. They are kind of the industry standard for modeling demographic shifts over, as far out as essentially they can go based on birth rates and census data. So what you'll see here, the percentage changes, for those that can see that, is the percent change of high school graduates in those states from 2023 to 2041, which is far out as their models and projections go. Now, on one hand, this could be alarming because you're like, well, we're going to see declines in almost every area where we've historically enrolled first-year students from. One caveat here, though, is this is not just an industry dynamic that's going to impact Drexel. It's going to impact 99% of the four-year institutions out there, right? What we're doing and what our charge is to develop, implement, and tweak our strategies to make sure that we're positioning Drexel in the best way possible to navigate these demographic shifts in the years ahead. These figures typically get updated on about a 4-year basis, so For those of us that are here in 2029, I might have a new flashy graphic to go over with you, and we'll see if the numbers changed a little bit. But one thing, if you hear about it, we will adjust our in-person recruitment efforts. We will adjust with how we're building our funnels based on these demographic shifts. I will tell you that there are some institutions out there that are taking the wait-and-see approach. And I'm happy to be here and not at those institutions, because we are not taking that approach. We are getting proactive in figuring out the best way, like I said, to get ahead of and navigate these shifts in the years ahead. So with that, I've got a little bit of time to take some questions before we break. And I've got a hand up already. We'll just wait for a mic. Can you just wait for a mic to come so the folks on YouTube can hear you, please? We're not phone calling, scheduled travel.
Helen, great presentation. I just wanted to mention really my support for, I think, the two last bullets on the two prior slides about the utilization of technology, and then the work of trying to streamline the transfer credit process through enrollment management. I have lived on both sides of that. So I used to oversee transfer admissions here. I also worked in the academic units when they were doing the transfer credit evaluations. As long as you have the appropriate communication between curricular changes, right, and the work that you're doing with transfer credit evaluations, I totally support that moving to EM, because I think a lot of institutions have really eaten our lunch by not being able to provide them with time to degree completion, because they haven't had their transfer credit evaluations in a timely fashion. That isn't a blanket statement indicting anybody across the board, but it has definitely varied from academic unit to academic unit over time. So just wanted to pledge my support for that.
Thanks, Ian. And yeah, just on that note, I talked about how we're not going to be able to fully realize all the benefits of academic transformation for another 18 to 24 months, but this is one of those spaces where we're controlling what we can control. So if a year from now we've put ourselves in a position to be able to provide those transfer credit evaluations for a prospective transfer student before they ever decide to apply, that is a way that we can look to grow transfer applications and grow transfer enrollments before we get to the point where we can fully realize the benefits of being on a semester calendar and not having to navigate how do your semester credits calculate to quarter credits. And there are other changes that are being worked through right now across the university. And I know my colleague Giuseppe and Michelle Spina is here, and they might touch on some of those at a high level later today when they're up here. Other questions? Yeah.
Down here, Craig. Come forward.
Yeah.
Hi, excuse me. Thank you for all that information. I was particularly excited about the AI-powered chatbot. That's something I've thought of as well in graduate admissions. I think that could be a significant game changer. I really like that idea, especially students in different time zones and instant answers to questions, pointing them in the right direction. I think that's really a wonderful idea. We heard a lot about the FAFSA and conversion to semesters. But I wonder if, over especially the last couple of recruiting cycles, if the market is trying to tell us something. And if we're doing that type of research about our cost, our facilities, our location, our quality, and if it's a little bit beyond those other things that we often talk about impacting enrollment.
Yeah. So Dawn has a little bit of a head start on me here at Drexel. She's been here for about 10 months longer. So she's going to dive in and talk about what's being discussed in terms of what we're reevaluating. But one thing I will tell you, because one of the things that comes up often is our price point. And sometimes I hear people talk about it or bring it up, and it just comes off like we're just defeated. All right? The institution that I worked at before I came to Drexel had the 4th highest sticker price of any private institution in the country. Price will always come up, right? It's how we respond to that conversation, that inquiry, that question. And what I've told our teams, and we talked about this at that graduate recruitment training last week up at Elkins Park, is the response to that is not necessarily about the price, right? The response to that is what's the return on investment? What's the value proposition of a Drexel education? Look at the outcomes of Drexel graduates and let those speak to the price. Because the challenge that I've always put back to the student or the parent that raises price as a point of concern, and it's not in a way to dismiss it, you validate the concern, but it's about the investment. You willing to make the investment in yourself? Because we have the outcomes data to back it up. We absolutely do. So that's my piece just on price as it is right now, but I'm gonna let Dawn step in and talk about what we may or may not have been considering and also touch on that AI chatbot. She got a little giddy.
So, but I do want to address the concern. So the other thing that oftentimes when people talk about, and they'll talk about, price point, is they'll talk about, are we too high? Should we do a tuition reset? And so Tom and I have spent a lot of time really talking about that, both before I got here. I wasn't talking about with him, but with other people. Tuition resets don't tend to work. And so we've looked at a lot of institutions who have done a deep dive into that. Some have actually reset their tuition, and within 10 years, they were back up in the same price point. So there's a lot of factors that go into that. What I will tell you is I think the work that Academic Transformation has done is going to allow us to really highlight that value proposition of a Drexel education. What our partners in UMAC have done in partnership with Ian and his team when it comes to co-op is elevating that story. We're number 2 in the nation with our experiential learning. That's something that we can be proud of. What I also want us to do, though, is elevate those other value propositions we have up to the level of co-op. We should be talking about our study abroad experiences. We should be talking about what happens in the Fulbright, and we have Fulbright winners. We should be talking about, the opportunities for undergraduate research here. So I want to see us elevate those other things and amplify those messages as well. When it comes to facilities at most colleges and institutions in the U.S., we all have deferred maintenance. Do I think that there are some of our facilities that need to be updated? Absolutely. But again, it goes back to where do we have the money, how do we have the money, and what do we do? And so, we're going to continue to do the very best with what we have to work with. We're going to continue to tell the story where we have that great story to tell. And right now, that's outcomes, and we're getting a lot of national press coverage for the work that we're doing in that area. And I actually think, given the focus of this presidential administration, workforce outcomes and our willingness to go back out and do more workforce development and more credentialing of students, I think those are going to play really well for us in this market. So we do look at those things. We don't have all the answers to those things. I want to go back real quick. So Hillen kind of drew the difference between what a chatbot is when it comes to a knowledge base versus the Chat GPT version that we're using now with Mario. I do get excited about it because, y'all, I had the knowledge base chatbot 7 years ago. What we're doing now and what the technology is able to do is phenomenal. It actually scrapes web pages that we direct it to update the information in real time, so we don't have to manage that. But what's cool about it, and where I kind of want to go with it, is when we have a student who's maybe interested in one of our programs and they log on at 3 o'clock in the morning, it'd be really nice for them to get a phone call 5 minutes later or an email 5 minutes later that addresses their concerns. Would you like someone to call you? Why, yes, I would like someone to call me. Boom, we have someone call them. Only it's not a real person. It's actually an AI recruiter, and we're able to use that technology currently with our incoming first years. I hope that we'll be able to do it with adults and then transfer students and those to get them real-time information. And there used to be a UPS commercial, and it talked about, just in time. That's where we are in the world of recruiting. It's not about us pushing the message out when we think students need it. We need to be responsive when they're asking the question and getting them the information when they're ready for it. And so that's what I think AI will allow us to do. So we have several different things. Tom uses a lot of what we used to call machine learning, which is now AI, in a lot of our predictive models that he builds. And so we're just going to see more of those tools come, and we want to make sure that we're taking advantage of them to be as efficient as possible. So you had a question in the brown shirt. Come back.
And the increased focus on recruiting at the yield stage. So I'm wondering how that aligns with the decision this year to eliminate 2 of the admitted student days, go from 4 down to 2, where that is, in fact, at the yield stage.
So actually, we didn't go down to 2 admitted student days. We have 4 admitted student days. We have 2 weekends. And so we are hoping that all of our school and college partners will attend both days of both weekends. And what we did is we had previously admitted student days, and then we also had New Dragon days. And what our students were telling us was there was a lot of confusion about, well, if I came to admitted student day, should I turn around and come to New Dragon days? But so we have 2 weekends happening, and we'll be here on Saturday and Sunday of both of those weekends. So we still actually have 4 admitted student days. But this way, we only have to pay for the setup and the takedown at DAC and audiovisual and all of that twice, as opposed to paying for it for 4 different times. So, right. Maybe your school hasn't told you yet that it's Saturday and Sunday both weekends. I don't know. Okay. All right, so we'll work with Jackie and make sure that that message is real clear, and so that everybody kind of understands and knows what we're hoping and what we expect to have happen. And that's also something like if you have certain dates or whatever, we're getting ready to go to break, happy to check in with you and just make sure it's real clear.
Yeah, just one additional point. So for the faculty who have to serve on these, putting everything on one weekend is a huge burden for us. And spreading it out makes it easy, because if we have to come in both days, that's the entire weekend that we've lost, and that's really challenging for us.
And no one feels that more than the admission staff, because we had to do the same. But the other thing is we had to take a third of our admitted student day budget. We're losing budget because we had the budget cuts, and we don't have the money to pay for a setup and a takedown 4 different times. And so this was a way that we could save funding to do that. We hope also by doing it that we make the events really special for the students, because we also heard from students when they were upset if they came, if all the schools and colleges were not represented on all the days that they were coming. So it is a change, and I appreciate the concern, because it does ruin basically a weekend that you have to come and do this. I hope that your school or college will support you then in taking additional time at another thing in the future. We try to do that for our staff, but we had to do it for cost savings and also for confusion that it was creating for students. And back to one of the original slides, we're really trying to focus on making things student-centric and getting students the experience that they're telling us they want at our price point. It is impossible for me to talk and not use my hands, and I'll just put them here. But basically, this was some of the feedback that we heard from students. So I appreciate your concern, and I do understand it.
So I do work recruitment in one of the colleges, and our understanding is that there are 2 weekend dates, but not every single college is on both dates. So, I mean, hopefully we can clarify that, because we need to figure that out. But
yes, and we will. Jackie's here, so we'll clarify that for you.
And the other thing that I wanted to ask about is, so part of what Dan is talking about is we're a little concerned about the lateness of those dates, because before we had the winter preview, we had a February admitted student day, we had and 2 April ones. Okay. And so, like in my college, for example, we're working to actually do one on February 8th ourselves within the college. So we're taking on that cost and we're taking on that. But it's been a little difficult to get kind of the outreach for that, for those events, because they're not university-wide events. For example, like they're not on the websites and things like that. So I'm just curious, when the colleges are taking on some of that and hopefully alleviating some of that from the MSF's office and the events office, what kind of supports are there that we can get from your office to get people at those events?
Can you remind me what college you're in? Okay. Specifically on the collaborative support services, we can take that offline. But I want to go back to your concern about the timing of the events this year. One conversation that Tom Gutman and I had this week is, because another change that we made in our strategy this year is our early action decisions historically were released in December. And this year we made the proactive decision to release them after January 1st. Why did we do that? Well, because of last year's FAFSA debacle. They came out early over the summer and said it's going to be out late. We were hedging our bets that if they pushed it back, we wanted to make sure we had enough time to get our decisions out, but also provide admitted students with accurate financial aid offers. Since we moved that back, it can throw off kind of a point-in-time analysis of enrollments for that early action population. One thing that Tom has looked at is where we see trends in enrollments after we've made offers and how that actually has been impacted historically by the timing of our events, which we have not had yet this year, and there has been no deviation in how our enrollments are trending post-offer at this point in time without those events. So all that to say that so far, the timing of the events this year being later in the calendar, we have seen no negative impact in how our early action enrollments are shaping up.
And I do have something to add.
Yeah, sure.
So one of the points that Hillen made early in his presentation was he talked about the fact that we are seeing students choosing to only visit schools to which they have been admitted. And so as that process has shifted, that is where we're seeing more students delay their time to visit to later in the spring of their senior year. And so one of the things we're doing is trying to make sure that we're hitting that strategy as well. And then quite honestly, between the FAFSA delay and then we're in Philadelphia, and we were having events in January that weren't necessarily showcasing the beauty of the city when you were coming here and it was really cold and wet and snowy. And so we also wanted to push them forward a little further along to give it a little more vibrancy, a little more feel, a little more, a prettier time of year. So we also wanted that. And it actually goes along more with what's happening in the industry across. More of these visits occur later. The other question that you ask about is how we could support you because you're conducting your own events. I would really like to visit with you because we're concerned that you conducting your own separate events will lead to confusion about which events a student should attend. And so we want to make sure that if you are hosting an event that you would be able to answer questions for the entire campus and it would have a similar feel as to the large scale events that we're doing. So we'd want to talk about that with you. So. All right, so with that, Jeremy, how long is our break? 2:10. All right, so we will go on a break until 2:10. I know we appreciate you coming back because we have a lot of good stuff to share.
Okay, thank you everyone for being here today. I'm glad to be here to be a part of this conversation. We're extremely excited to meet with all you and have this opportunity, so thank you to Dawn and the admissions team for being a part of that. We are Marketing Communications, University Marketing Communications, and we're going to touch on a few items today. I'm Craig Campus. I'm the VP of Marketing for University Marketing Communications, and I'm just going to start off today with a brief agenda. We're basically going to give a brief introduction about who we are, talk a little bit about branding of the university, and then how that applies to undergraduate enrollment, graduate enrollment, and of course how you can all collectively help us to move Drexel forward. So starting with that, again, we are the Division of University Marketing Communications, also known as UMAC. Drexel loves our acronyms. And we are the central marketing and communications unit for the university, but we certainly support all of our colleagues and divisions around Drexel. And we are led by Tracy Powell, she's the Senior Vice President, as well as my two colleagues, Nadine Azat, who will speak a little bit later today on graduate enrollment, I'm going to speak today on brand and undergraduate enrollment strategies, and of course, Nikki Giannakaris, who really focuses on earned media, and of course, you can see all the different levels of areas in which we support. That really kind of rounds out what university marketing communications is. But I think one thing to share about us as an organization is that we are really one integrated unit with lots of different skill sets, and it gives us the opportunity to provide comprehensive surround sound approaches, which we like to talk about, in terms of a variety of different media and expertise to make sure we're positioning Drexel in the market and to all of our audiences in the best possible way, in the most efficient way, and the most compelling way. We do have many audiences in which we cover being a central unit, and all of them are critically important, whether it be our prospective students and families, our alumni, key partnerships, internal communications, of course, to our students, and influencers, media, anyone who has an opinion about Drexel University. But really, when we think about it, what is the common message that we share to everybody about Drexel University? And that's what kind of leads us into the concept of the Drexel brand and kind of how we support that for the university. You know, when people think about the Drexel brand, it's a lot more than, you know, a logo or a dragon or even Mario. When we talk about the Drexel brand, it really is talking about defining what makes Drexel, Drexel. What's the DNA of who we are? What do we stand for? What is our place? And it's really for everybody. It's all those audiences. It's that top level message to say, okay, who are these people? And that's how we think about it. When we think about developing a Drexel brand is how do we present Drexel to the world? What are the one thing we want, or a few things that we want people to take away when they think about us as a university? And really from a sense of goals, what we really want to do with the Drexel brand is just to make the world more aware of us and more familiar with us. Not everyone knows Drexel right off the bat. We do have some really strong brand recognition, but how do we make that stronger? How do we make it more powerful and make sure that people know who we are and just a little bit more about us? And also it's important for us to share what is our promise, what is our value. We heard a lot today about value proposition. When people think about Drexel University, when we say this is who we are, why should people believe us? What do we have to offer the world? Because right now, I think most of us know, just open up a book, we live in an era of increased focus about the ROI, access, trust, and the value of higher education. The world demands more right now from higher education, and we have more. We just need to tell our story better. And we tell ourselves every day, how can we tell our story, the Drexel story, better to most people? So in doing that, you may ask, what's the most important thing that we do at Drexel? And everyone has an idea, but what we decided to do to make sure we're doing so in an efficient and a collective manner was to build a brand platform. And we started this work based on some research in around 2003, last year. And where we've landed is something that we already knew about ourselves, is that we are a global leader of experiential education. And when people think experiential education, they might think co-op, they might think, you know, whatever, internships, but really experiential education is all of these things that you may find under it. It is co-op, it's really the balance of our world-class academic model and real-world experience coming together to really preparing our students for the future and the real world. It's our R1 research and discovery, right? It's the classification that we have, that we do great work there. It's that type of experience. It's the powerful partnerships that we form both locally, nationally, around the world that helps our students, helps our faculty, moves our research forward. Like Dawn said earlier, and Hillen did too, it's about our global reach and impact. It's the students that we send all over the world, whether it be on study abroad or the partnerships that we make abroad or whatever reach that we have, but also the students and the communities that come and join us from all over the world. And frankly, it's also our commitment to engagement. We are a university who is ready and willing to engage with local partners, local institutions, national institutions. Really, it's who we are as our drive, and really our commitment to Philadelphia as being an anchor institution of the city. So defining that kind of gives us more when we say what's Drexel stand for. It's not just co-op, it's all of these things and leveling that up. So we developed a small campaign to kind of talk about that and really invite people to experience what education can be. That concept of using experience almost as like a verb, right? We are a world of experiences you can have. We are changing what people think about higher education because we have this model. And what we've known from research is that the world is asking for this. Our research is saying the world is asking for more experiential opportunities, and we're trying to lean into that. So we've taken this step and kind of moved this forward to talk about outcomes, put this out in the world at a high level to really kind of lean into that concept that we are a global leader of experiential education. Not many people are a global leader of anything. We have an opportunity to really position ourselves strongly in the marketplace to something that we know from research the world is asking for. So when we think about the brand, the Drexel brand, we know that, again, as I mentioned before, our goals are really about broad messaging for all audiences, but really generating awareness and familiarity. That's what we're doing in this space. But as we think about all of our partners throughout the university, they have all their other audiences. They have all their other initiatives in which they're putting forth and people that they're speaking to. And what we use at the Drexel brand in talking about those big messages is almost like the megaphone to generate, again, awareness, this high level of these core points of what we believe Drexel stands for. So when we look at opportunities like recruitment campaigns that admissions puts forth, and they're talking to their audiences, we know that when they reach out and have those type of meaningful conversations with prospective students, with counselors, with friends, influencers, families, that there's a high-level message going out that know that we are a leader of experiential education, and we believe in all these concepts. So when they're having those detailed conversations of what makes Drexel Drexel for them, and what's important to them, they have a baseline. And also, as admissions travels, we talked about before, and picking, these aren't real markets, it's a sample, but when admissions is looking what kind of markets they want to go to and find students, they know that we can align our efforts with their efforts to make sure that when they're hitting and traveling to high schools and whatever fairs they may go to, that there's some coverage there of talking about the Drexel brand in different types of media. As you think more about undergraduate marketing strategy and how we can align with that, we work together to overall just provide opportunities for students to just explore and connect to what's important to them. How can we let students know that Drexel's a place for them based upon our work together, our partnership? And that's truly what we are. Enrollment management and division and University Marketing Communications is a true partnership. We work really closely together to ensure strategies and messaging are aligned with enrollment goals. And we make sure we execute them really in a manner where we work together in a collaborative way. So in short, enrollment management, setting enrollment strategy. We heard a lot of that today. They're setting goals and targeting, and we're providing opportunities and strategic marketing recommendations to support them. And together we come together to execute on them, collectively as a group. And we win and move forward together. When we think about how we support them specifically, we really look at three core areas of recruitment with enrollment management. There's travel, as we talked about before, it's admissions travels all over the country. We help supply them with messaging strategies, with recruitment materials, pull-up banners, things that kind of bring our brand to them so they have tools to help tell their message and tell their stories. We also, as you heard earlier, we help support on-campus events and open houses and virtual visits, making sure that we're providing an experience for students when they come to campus that they become immersed in the brand. And then probably most importantly, we develop a multi-year, multi-channel marketing communications plan. This is a really comprehensive direct marketing plan that includes thousands of emails and text messages and videos all coming together in what we like to also look at as a surround sound approach. Much like we mentioned before how UMAC works in terms of our expertise, we're able to apply that expertise to a lot of our communication plans to make sure students, families are being surrounded by all these different types of media and on message. One email does not necessarily make someone come to Drexel University. It's many, many touch points. So how can we live in that and really expand upon that and align? Another thing that's also equally as important is that we also do so in a direct marketing approach. So what I mean by that is that you may ask, well, I've seen some of the Experience Drexel stuff like on, subway stations or whatnot, right, out in the market, but I haven't seen a lot of the enrollment stuff. And a lot of that is because we work in a direct marketing fashion, which means we are marketing literally and customizing communications and messaging directly to the student, right? So we're targeting the student in terms of places where they will be at, where media they consume. And we've designed all of these type of details so we can provide detailed, specific messaging to these students in these fields. So we have the broad message of the general campaigns that we're doing, but really the specific direct messages that lean into what these audiences specifically want or asking for. And we think about messaging strategy at the enrollment space. Drexel is a big, big, complicated place. And I think a lot of the work that we're doing specifically now is trying to simplify that, making it easier for students. We've heard that with transfer and a lot of the work that we're doing with academic transformation, right? But we want to try to position our messaging to really position Drexel as a place where students can explore and experience everything. Lean into that idea of experiences. Become more personal, more approachable, more discovery. Let students know this is a place where they can kind of find themselves and find out what they want to be and where they want to go. The messaging will still align with the brand, as I mentioned before, connecting with the big messages that are out there by providing more detail about the opportunity what experiential education can provide. And most importantly, provide the idea of sending the right message to the right students and at the right time. We talked about that a little earlier. Timing is everything. And sometimes students work on a different clock than ours. But in order to do that and to be so segmented, we need to make sure that we are listening to our students. If students are providing, and families, if they're providing information to us about what they're looking for and what they want to be, we need to make sure that we're sending that information back to them and providing opportunities for them to explore there. So for example, when we look at different kind of buckets of themes, right, academic themes, if a student says, I'm interested in media or creative arts or design, we are going to send them communications, and not specifically to that program, as Helen mentioned earlier, but to a general area of all the opportunities we have in these type of creative fields. So a student who's raised their hand and said, I'm interested in this field, can look and explore and feel something in terms of what might be right for them as they look at what Drexel has to offer. More so in terms of segmented interest, we'll look at things like admissions entry round. Like I said, we have comprehensive communications plans. So we're talking to students even earlier, but freshman year all the way through senior year. The amount of information that we share with them has to be measured, right, and specific and detailed to what they need at that time in their college search process. So we're constantly talking to them and their families and cultivating them, bringing them along in terms of the information that they're looking for and meeting them where they're at. But again, looking at areas of interest, if they're talking about civic engagement or spiritual life or study abroad, we want to make sure they're getting that information if they're telling us that. Even things like family economic status. Some people look at outcomes at Drexel University and even co-op messaging differently depending on where they're from. Some families and students may look at getting a job. And that's the most important thing to do when they leave Drexel, or getting a sense of what kind of outcomes from a financial standpoint they may look like. Others that may be more resourced may not look at getting a job as the most important thing, but getting the right job, getting the job that they love, opportunities where they might not be able to get anywhere else. So we think about that as we craft these messages and as we look at different audiences in which we market to. Geographical, now more than ever, international audiences have different views and different needs than most. Students on the West Coast, Pennsylvania. What do people know about Philly? What do people know about studying or going to college in the United States? That's the type of segmented messaging we're making sure we're putting out there for all students and families, depending on where they're from and what information they give us. And of course, high-achieving students, we always have plenty of opportunities for them. Let's make sure we're continuing to share what historically they've been a fan of. We talked a lot about embracing new technologies, and we've been really supporting that as well, too. Artificial intelligence, we talked a lot about that. You know, it sounds scary, but it's really an opportunity, and we need to learn to live and understand how we can take advantage of all those opportunities with using chatbots like Mario. But there's more, looking at connected TV. If you're familiar with connected TV, which is also called CTV, streaming, Hulu's, all those channels of the world, that's providing opportunity for us to take advantage of sharing video on a mass level, right, but in a very segmented approach. And we'll talk more about that earlier, but we can actually pinpoint households in terms of audiences where we might see a video that maybe we created. Community ecosystems. We're looking to build ecosystems and almost like platforms for parents to get together and talk and share information, similar like they did on like Facebook back in the day, but much more robust of opportunity and connections. Similar with admitted students. How can we build these digital platforms so communities can be built and share and learn from each other as they kind of go through the college search process? Two-way texting, moving past the idea of just putting text out, let's have conversations through where students are living, which is on their phone. And then, of course, there's been more advances in targeted social media and digital media, where we're not just posting messages on our own social sites, but how can we reach particular students specifically on their site with the right message at the right time? I talked about CTV, and I have to say, of course, I wanted to get at least one Eagles logo in here, so, of course, go Birds. But as we think about connected TV, and we think about the opportunities that connected TV offers us, we're able to take messages, right, these big, beautiful media types, these type of that TV and video provides, and pinpoint households where we can show this message. So back in the day, TV was a big ask. It's a big investment. Of course, you all know that. But now we're able to kind of be so segmented that we're able to pick people that we choose can see this spot in a household where not just they'll see it on a device or their TV, but their family will as too. Which brings me back to the Eagles. Like, there's a big game next week, right? Next weekend. Like, it's possible that one of our students could see the beautiful video from us during the Super Bowl. That's not to say we're buying this giant Super Bowl ad or Super Bowl buy. We're just being very segmented and deliberate in terms of who we're talking to. Right time, right message to the right people. But there's more. Like I said, we're leaning more into ideas of digital media and how we can explore that for this particular audience and how we can leverage these type of opportunities and expertise that we have here. It's thinking about direct mail. We're still sending mail to make sure that we're making sure that families and parents have the opportunity to grab something tangible and read and look and make sure we're in their house. It's looking at travel materials. As we're on the road, as I mentioned before, how are we supporting admissions as they're out traveling the world, telling the Drexel story. Or when they're back here, what kind of information can we give them to guide their experience when they're here for the day? These events that we put on are pretty impressive. And it takes all of us to do that, as we talked about earlier. And it really makes a difference because when students are here, right, we can immerse them in the complete brand experience. And we know from data that if a student comes to campus, there's the likelihood that they will apply and enroll. So we need to make sure that we all come together to support these efforts. And we all do. And between the work that you all put forth with us and support us and our students and providing these opportunities to make students feel not just welcome, but really feel like this is a place for them and a welcoming place for them and a place where they can connect, including our student ambassadors who speak for us as ambassadors on that peer level who really tell our story. Of course, we're leaning into social media. I think we all know that. And we're challenging the social media landscape that's constantly changing. But we're also making sure we're there telling our stories, not just pushing out media, but make sure our students are telling stories, providing that authenticity of the experiences that they're having here at the university and what it means to them. And then when they come back and they tell us on social media how excited they are to show up here, that's usually the best day of work. Or when they're actually, students get admitted to, and they share their excitement with the world, and they're joining communities, and they're showing our admit packet and saying, I'm proud to be a New Dragon. So we take all that information, and we talked about MELT earlier during the summer. Once they get admitted, we take the time over the summer. We still continue to talk to them, engage with them, get them excited about what is to come and what their life is going to be like when they become a Drexel Dragon, and talking about Welcome Week and what that's going to look like. And then we hand that over to Student Success, and they take over and they make sure that the students are well prepared, understand the resources that are available to them, like the ARC, to make sure they can have a successful career here. So a quick glimpse on undergraduate marketing. I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Nadine. Is that going to talk about graduate marketing strategy?
Good afternoon, everyone. Good to see you all. How you doing? Are we excited to talk about grad? I'm excited. All right. I'm going to tell you a little bit about a project that's near and dear to our heart here. But for those of you that don't know me, my name is Nadine Ezat. I've been at Drexel 19 years. First in the online space at Drexel Online, and most recently with my awesome colleagues at University of Marketing and Communications. Before that, when I was 12, I worked at the University of Central Florida. Always in higher ed. I'm the product of 2 university professors, so near and dear to my heart for sure. So as you might have heard in the prior sessions, recruiting for grad is different. We are very program specific, we're very industry specific. So giving you a little bit of an idea of the landscape of grad, it's quite large here at Drexel. We have 14 colleges and schools. Of course, that's transforming as we speak, but that is a pretty large portfolio, as you can see here, in terms of master's programs, PhDs, professional doctorates, and certificates. And so marketing those programs at a pretty individual program-specific level, of course, takes a lot of effort and marketing dollars. And so we really needed a way to strategize about how we were going to work on this very large portfolio and maximize all of our resources that we have at Drexel. So the process started about a year ago through this Drexel Graduate Portfolio Review. And step 1 was done in partnership with the schools and colleges and the provost office to take a look at programs and their performance. And our University Marketing and Communications team, along with our enrollment management team, came in at the step 2 here to identify programs that are really primed and ripe for promotion, where we're really going to be able to get out there and generate strong enrollments for these programs. I'll tell you more about that in a moment. And then that really leads to step 3, which is ongoing and very exciting, which is a review of these programs on a very regular basis so that we're constantly taking a look at what we can improve, where we can make our mark in the higher ed space. So this Pillar Programs project really started out of a need to take that vast portfolio that you saw a few slides ago that was growing each year and take a pretty constant or sometimes decreasing marketing budget and try to figure out how we streamline that and our human resources to make the biggest impact. So how did we do this? This is where we're going to make t-shirts with our methodology here, with our 3 M's, which many of you have heard us talk about before. Starting out with the market. The market is really something we can't control very much, right? But it's what is the demand for these programs? What are the conferral trends looking like? How many universities are out there offering these degrees? What are the job trends for the positions that are coming out of those grad programs? If there's not a market for a program, it's going to be difficult for us to, drive enrollments in that market. That leads us to the second M, which is is the program that we're looking at marketable? Is it meeting that market need? Are we priced properly? Do we have the right concentrations or curriculum to meet that market demand? Our length of our program and how is it stacking up to our competitors? Down to program name even sometimes is impacting marketability. So marketability is, conversely, something that we can control at Drexel. We can make updates to our programs. We can make sure that they're current and meeting those market needs. And then the third M, which we love, is marketing. So are we getting the word out to the right people, in the right places, using the right messaging, spending the right amount of money, and hitting those right target audiences? Very often, we look to that third M without really exploring the first two. And so we went through this exercise to really look at those first two M's to determine where we might be able to lean in for the moment and also make changes in that marketability segment as well. So along with my colleagues in UMAC and in enrollment management, we looked at market research metrics. We looked at marketing analytics for a very large number of metrics that you see on the screen here for our 160 master's programs and 13 revenue-generating doctoral programs. It took a while, about 9 months, but it was really eye-opening and gave us a really strong picture of metrics for the programs, and these are metrics that we're keeping up to date very regularly so that we can look at them and cycle through them every few years to make sure that we're current on the market for each of these programs. So how did we use all of this data? We used the data to put programs within a college side by side and look at a marketability score for the program and a market score for the program. Apologize for the nerdy data on here, but I'll give you a real life example in a moment. From a marketability perspective, we took a look at a competitor set for each one of the programs. And we compiled that competitor set by looking at who is doing well. So we looked at the CIP code for that degree and who are the top 10 in that particular zip code. And we looked at the clearinghouse data. If people are getting an offer from Drexel, but they're choosing another school, what is that school? And we compiled that competitor set and compared the tuition, the length of degree, how many credits, all of those factors. Using that data, we were able to assign a marketability score. The second piece touched on the first M, which is market potential. Here is where we looked at completions, so how many people are earning these degrees. We looked at first a 3-year period, and in many cases we had to go back 6 years because of our friend COVID, which messed up all of the trends in the industry, so caused us to have to look back a little further. And then we looked at the percent growth of those completions in the region. And then we also looked at job growth for related jobs to those programs to assign a market potential score. With those two scores, we were able to plot the programs and their performance on this 4x4 matrix, with the idea being we would love for all of our programs to be in that top green quadrant there. Programs that have a strong market and are marketable and meet that market need. The other quadrants are interesting. The one on the top, the lower bottom red quadrant, not a great place to be, but maybe we can do things to help improve marketability. And then the two yellows are places where we might be able to move the needle based on changes we could make. So I'll give you an example of a program out of our Westfall College of Media Arts and Design, the MS in Arts Administration, which has been fantastic to work with our colleagues at Westfall on this program, that ended up in the top quadrant here and was, quickly became a pillar program, and we'll show you a little bit of reasons why. So a little about the program. It enrolls about 40 new students a year, and you can see the NTR there. There are no capacity restrictions on the program, so we're able to grow it as much as we can, which is fantastic from a marketing perspective. On the left, you can see the market factors. So in this case, the job growth for people coming out with this degree is above the national average at 19%. Completions were growing 21% nationally year over year and 38% within our region, which is great given that the Drexel brand is strongest within our region, of course. The number of competitors, we saw the number of competitors in the market decrease slightly, but the number of completions per institution increased, which leaves space for us as Drexel to have room to grow our program in the market. And then it has a decent amount of monthly search volume. That indicates that people are looking for the degree in Google, which is great. On the marketability side, the program is available in both modalities, which makes it flexible for people. It's about 30% lower than the average tuition for that competitor set that I described before. It is 21% shorter in terms of number of credits. It seems like a large percentage, but it's just a few credits, but makes a difference, especially to adult learners who are looking for finishing a degree quickly and making an impact quickly. There were a lot of partner opportunities. So there are partners in the area and nationally that we can partner with to help recruit students for this program. And market research showed a need for an update to the name of the program, and the college was great and jumped right in and made that change quickly. So as you can see, a lot of factors helped this program become a pillar. And when it rose to become a pillar, what did we do? Here's where we activated our marketing and recruitment toolkit, partnering with our college and school partners at Westfall. This includes taking a look at market research for the program, making sure we're updated. And I'll show you in a moment, that included taking a look at what our competitors are saying. So we identified who our competitors were. We looked at what their creative looks like. What are they saying? What are their messages? And where are their opportunities for us to stand out? We did a creative refresh and looked at fresh content for the program, updated the web and landing pages, invested in paid media so we can get the word out about the program, working with our partners in EM and strategic partnerships. And you can see the list here. We're going to a conference, for example, related to this particular program. Cultivating the leads that come in. So not only generating the leads, but keeping that message going throughout the pipeline to enrollment. And then analyzing everything we do so that we can take a look at what's working, what's not working, and adjusting our strategy accordingly. So these are just some examples here. I mentioned that we looked at competitor advertising. So several universities assessing their creative and their messaging and identifying opportunities where we might be able to message differently or stand out compared to these groups. We did this creative refresh in working with the college and school. We sat with the program directors, the recruiters, the marketers, and really understood who's our target audience, who are we trying to reach, what motivates them, what would they respond to, and adjusting our creative accordingly and our messaging. Paid media, so making sure that we're out there, as we mentioned, keeping in mind that being industry or program specific is important. So putting ads in places where people might be looking for career advancement in the arts, for example, as well as, of course, paid social, big recruitment draw, and search. And then we have many opportunities in progress, making videos with our partners at the college and school, two-way texting, which Craig touched on a little bit, featuring current students and alumni, and many others. So we're very excited about this program and the partnership that we have, but also creating this toolkit for all of our pillar programs. So how do we work together? One thing that we like to say, we love in marketing, but we believe really it's our job at all of us at Drexel, is to tell Drexel's story. We are all storytellers. And so working closely with all of you in the academic units, we need your subject matter expertise. We need to understand the audience. We need to understand the topic and where we might be placing content. Content development. So as you have rockstar faculty stories, as you have fantastic student stories, sharing those with us so that we can develop content around it. Responsiveness to new market needs. Sometimes things pop up in the industry that we learn about, and so being responsive and being able to quickly pivot and provide or change something in the program to respond is also very helpful. The access is that middle bar there. So providing access to students, to alumni, to faculty for marketing purposes. So if you have students that want to tell their story or have a great story, surfacing those for us so that we can profile them. And then more of the tactical things on the bottom there, developing shared goals. What are our goals for the program in terms of enrollment and in terms of net tuition revenue? Keeping the programs consistent during our pillar program cycle, because we don't want to make too many changes to impact the potential for the program to grow. And then ideas and collaboration, coming to us and partnering so that we can collaborate together and really tell this Drexel story in a better way. I think we might have time for questions. Okay. Any questions? No? All right. Oh, question, yes.
Hi, Nadine.
Hi.
Can you drill down on content development as far as telling alumni and student stories? How personal do you get with those?
That's a great question. I think, if they are outcomes focused, that's what's going to generate the best return in terms of the program. So success that they might have achieved in their career, a change they might have made in their life because of the program. Those are the types of stories that really that resonate with prospective students and make them feel that, this is something they want to be a part of. So those are the types of stories. Would you want to add to that, Craig?
Yeah, sure. So there's not a lot of questions. As we lean into the concept of experiences and experiential education, it's important for us to also highlight the experiences of not just what the students do, right, but it's the research that we do. It's the experiences of the faculty, what they've accomplished, how do we celebrate them? And I think that's what we want to do more of, and we should be doing more of, and we're excited about that. We just need to make sure we're finding the ways to get the access to that information and tell those stories.
You mentioned research. Is it possible, how deeply do you go into the actual people who do the research and what their passion is for those things that they're researching?
I think it's measured on different approaches depending on the media and the opportunity, but I think the word that you said there was passion, and I think that's the most important point, that we want to convey that this community has a passion for the work that they do, and that's infectious, and we want to make sure that other people feel that. So whether we have to go into a detailed level of storytelling or a tweet or an X, whatever we're calling it these days, that's what's important to us, and we want to make sure that we're open to having a conversation with anybody about what's available.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Oh, we'll send out our emails in case you have questions.
All right, so before we move to our last segment, I just wanted to do a quick wraparound and just, kind of recap how the various admission units are partnering with the various teams and units in university marketing and communications to really provide a comprehensive strategic approach to supporting enrollment across the university, regardless of the subpopulation. And I neglected one shout out earlier. So I know we touched on the AI chatbot that we have on the website, and I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Nick Perez and Ryan Wall in UMac. They have taken on a huge amount of the work there to getting that up and running and supporting that, and we've seen almost immediate returns. So thanks to you both for leading that effort. All right, so we're up to our final group here. And this is where we'll transition out of more recruitment-focused, marketing-focused work and really circle back to enrollment management, as Dawn touched on in one of her earlier slides. So I'll turn it over to my colleagues.
Good afternoon, everyone. How are we doing? I thought Nadine had y'all teed up. Y'all, we're rounding the third base, and that's the only sports metaphor I got for you. So, my name is Jeremy Dickerson. I'm VP of Enrollment Management Systems and Financial Services. I'm really glad to be here today to talk with you all about the way that we in enrollment management contribute to student and campus support. And that's the point of the next few slides. And as we go along here, I'm going to be joined by my colleagues Michelle Spina and Giuseppe Salamone, who are going to talk to you about some of the things that they do to support students and the campus. But first, I've just got to tell you, somebody inevitably, because I've been here 115 days, somebody inevitably will come up to me once a week and go, has Drexel gotten to you yet? And I got to tell y'all, I love working at Drexel. And it's because I've got mostly fun and supportive colleagues, right? But I've also got this team right here that I get to work with. This team is an amazing one. So it comprises financial aid, Bursar, international students and scholar services, and academic and information systems, and Drexel Central. And when I look at the work that this group does, it takes our highly complex systems, our highly complex curricula, and it really kind of boils it down. Just about once a week, we're given a problem that's really complex and seemingly impossible. And the folks represented on this slide and the people they lead do amazing work to get the answers that we need and the solutions to those problems. So just shout out to those teams. What I'm going to do is talk to you a little bit about a case study in Drexel Central that kind of illustrates our approach in enrollment management to problem solving and tackling problems that are within the division, causing barriers for students and also for you. As I'm going through this, I'm going to talk a lot about student support and retention, and it's not in any way to diminish the work that goes on in your units and student affairs, but it really is to highlight that student support and retention are things that we think about within enrollment management as well. And so the example I have up here is, what role does the bursar have to play in student retention? It's probably a question you haven't pondered, but if you're up late one night, give it some thought and maybe it'll put you to sleep. So we all remember this story, right? Some of us went to college at a time when the dean would stand in front of people and say, look to the left, look to the right. One of these people will not be with you on graduation day. And as we think about the landscape of higher ed, so the enrollment cliff that Dawn and Hillen talked about, the fact that there are just fewer students available to us to recruit, we really can't afford to have this mindset anymore. And I'm glad that we don't have it here at Drexel. It's just to highlight how we've changed in the past 40 years. 40 years ago, students were aplenty. Then that well dried up with the GI Bill, and students started being less and less available to us to recruit. And so we've really had to refine in enrollment management the ways we recruit, but also think about keeping the students that we have recruited. And we're really fortunate to work in this space, right? Because if we think about student success, it's a win-win proposition. If a student is successful at Drexel, it redounds to our reputation, which feeds our revenue and feeds our recruitment efficacy. And so it's really rewarding. I think we all got in the profession because we wanted to help students be successful. And it's rewarding when we see our efforts pay off because it allows us to continue the effort of finding new students, bringing them to Drexel, and helping them change their lives for the better. And so that's what I think about when I think about student support. There's also a financial reality to this work. This slide illustrates the fact that at private institutions, the average cost of recruiting one undergraduate student was $2,795 in 2022. And if you think about retaining a student, there are costs associated with that in advising, in instruction, in the registrar's office, but those are pretty much sunk costs because we have to have those in order to do our business. So it really is to our advantage to have a student-ready mindset when we think about our work, and that's what we're going to talk about in Drexel Central. So if we think about enrollment management at a foundational level, all EM employees are driving towards student success in some way or another. I mentioned the bursar's office earlier. We also have systems analysts in our division that work with Mary Quigley. They promote student success, but they may not ever interact with a student. But the work they're doing, alleviating barriers in systems, is central to the task of keeping students. So there really is a continuum of how often folks in enrollment management are interacting with our constituents. Some will never interact with a constituent because that's their job, and others are going to interact on a very frequent basis like they do in Drexel Central. So the original design of Drexel Central was to be the customer service, and I won't use customer too much, but just think about it this way. It was to be the customer service arm of financial aid and bursar. So the student-facing wing of those two offices to be able to answer questions about the bill, about financial aid, also about registration, just general things that come to them in the course of advising a student on a particular problem. And on balance, this model works. If you think about it, if you are calling Drexel Central with a crunchy billing question or a crunchy financial aid hold question, generally those are not calls that people are set up with success to receive. But still, 74% of our students, when surveyed, say that they're either satisfied or very satisfied with the office that provides them the answer and counsels them through that problem. And I think that's a really impressive benchmark, and we should be proud of that. Still, we know that Drexel Central is facing some issues. I'm highlighting here that last calendar year, they received 60,000 phone calls, a peak of 793 in a day. I'm lucky if I get 2 and I'm still annoyed, so I can't even imagine 793, right? They also fielded 41,000 interactions, and as I mark up here, this is not the status quo. We are seeing ever-increasing volumes of calls and walk-ins to Drexel Central. And so in my mind, when I hear that, the task is, what can we do to make sure that the students have the answer that they need and don't even have to come to Drexel Central unless it's a really kind of nested problem? And that's the work that I think about when I come to day, is what are the problems that are creating spikes in calls and spikes in in-person visits to Drexel Central that we can tackle either through updated web content, and shout out to my friends in UMac. They've already thought about this and have proposed a structural change to the Drexel Central website that we're reviewing. But I also think about our systems. So sometimes we set it and forget it. An example would be banner messages, right? If you have a hold on your account, generally there's some sort of verbiage about that hold. If we're telling a student when they are looking at their portal that we're lacking their CSS profile and we say, you know, CSS profiles received will generally clear off your checklist in 1 week. If that is no longer a realistic service expectation, we need to go back to that banner language and change it so they have a realistic service expectation. And so that's kind of what I think about when I think about this work. Because of the volume, the functional offices have stepped up, and they are now actually taking phone calls and resolving issues on behalf of Drexel Central, which was not the designed intent of the relationship between the offices. And I'm really thankful that they have stepped up to do this while we address the volume issues so that we can ensure that students are getting quality customer service. Still, I have to acknowledge that it distracts them from their work. So if we go back to, we go back to the CSS profile. If a student is calling about their CSS profile and our financial aid team is having to hunt that down, that means that they're falling behind on other CSS profiles that they could be processing. So we do need to find a way to have first resolution in Drexel Central and reserve the functional offices to be ones that take calls and take escalations for things that are really nested and really complicated. And so we're moving towards that goal. I just want to give one example of the way that this approach to enrollment management works in helping students get answers quickly and therefore be more satisfied. An example would be billing. So in the fall quarter, we did what we had always done, and we dropped all of our bills on one day. The result of that was that Drexel Central received 793 phone calls the next day, and the average wait time was over an hour. Now, this is work that predated me, but it's a great example, so I don't want to take credit for it. But in the winter quarter, we released bills in 3 stacks. So we split up the student population, divided them in 3, and released them in 3 days. The result of that was 270 phone calls the following day with an average wait time of up to 5 minutes. And I'm sure you can appreciate students, parents calling in are going to be much more satisfied with the university and happy in their choice having chosen Drexel if they're only having to wait 2 to 3 minutes as opposed to an hour to resolve their billing concern. So it's one small example. I thanked our bursar for doing this, and she said, oh, it was only a button I had to click. And I was like, yeah, but you don't realize what an impact that had for our students and what an effect it had for our employees in their day-to-day quality of professional life and not having to have those phone calls where a person's been hot because they've been waiting for an hour to talk to somebody. So as we continue this work, you can help. You are on the front line, many of you, dealing with students, working with them, hearing their concerns. you can surface to us confusing practices. You can share our blind spots with us, and trust that we're here to collaborate. There are several of you in the auditorium who have reached out to me about a question or a concern, and we've resolved it together, right? And it's something that I always think about. Even if we can't resolve it now, let's work towards the solution, and we want to continue that practice. I'm sorry my ABC 123 got cut off there at the bottom. It is JD3879, and it'll be on the final slide whenever we get to the question and answer session. So with that, Michelle, will you please come up?
Hi everyone, good afternoon. I'm excited to be here and speak to you a little bit about intercollege advising. The Office of Intercollege Advising, and sometimes I'm going to slip into it the acronym ICA that we refer to ourselves as, is charged with developing strategies that enhance the student experience through the lens of academic advising and to help students navigate their experiences here both academically and co-curricularly. Our office is comprised of 2 team members. Erin Lasky, if you're reaching out to us when it comes to time trade, AVT, degree works, CPOS, any of those larger system issues, Erin's going to be the one who answers that question most likely, and myself. I'm the executive director, and I work with Erin. And as a small team, we have the opportunity to work with a lot of people here at Drexel and share that responsibility. So as I said, our main priority is supporting our students through the lens of academic advising, and we do that in a couple of ways. And the first way we do that is creating a unified experience from our systems. It can be incredibly confusing for a student who's transversing colleges to understand how to do one thing over here and something else over there. So our job is to create a similar experience across so it's also equitable for students. One way we do that is maintaining a centralized scheduling system called Time Trade, and we can't do that without our help, our friends in AIS, specifically Heidi. And to get an idea of what this looks like, within just between fall and now, 12,590 student appointments were scheduled through Time Trade with academic advisors alone. Steinbright also uses this system, ISSS uses this system, and that's not including those appointments. So can you imagine what it would be like if we had that many student appointments scheduled in all different ways, in all different places? It would be really hard to access academic advising. So that's kind of an example of what we do. And similarly, what if it was different for a student to change their major and change their minor and change their graduation date in all different ways? Again, we partner with the Registrar's Office and AIS, Academic Information Systems, to ensure that those processes run in a similar fashion. So again, imagine if, since the fall, nearly 6,000 changes to curriculum were made at the undergrad level. All of those have to go to Jeremy's offices in Drexel Central. They all go to Giuseppe and OUR. Many go to Steinbright. A lot are initiated through the academic advisor or Steinbright. Imagine if that was all different, how many barriers our students would be facing to update their academic curriculum to make it what they want it to be. So our job, Erin and my job, is to work with our academic advisors, work with our students to make sure those systems work well, and work for their users. We do that through constant contact with our academic advisors and our partners around campus. So through advising leads, through different meetings we have with advisors, they're able to pinpoint the issues that we're seeing that are rubbing points for our students and help us design, plan, test, and build different processes and make them better and enhance the student experience. They could, often, it's identified at that ground level with advisors, and we work with them to test the systems and update them. And again, we can't do that without the Registrar's Office. We can't do that with our partners in Steinbright, AIS, Sean Brown, Heidi, Joanne, Aunt Mary, all really, really important to these experiences and making them better as we continuously test, review, and launch all of these different things. Another aspect that ICA takes on, Intercollege Advising takes on, is advisor training. There's a lot of training that happens at the college level so that advisors know exactly what they're doing. However, we've been able to pull some things into our office to create centralized experiences. And our number one and the shining work of Erin Lasky is the Advising Hub. Every advisor has access to the SharePoint because we put a lot of our training behind this. So if you want access to the systems that allow you to do your job, you need access to the SharePoint, and Erin has designed it to be incredibly user-friendly. So you can see on the side, this is just a little snapshot of some of the information we have in here. It's really how you navigate our systems as well as other pieces of training. To help manage some of our resources, we also purchased Nakata webinars for our university community and house them in here. If you're interested, we have one coming up in March that we've already purchased on documenting. Everyone is welcome to come. We've already registered for it. We do it in person and online. And it's a really great way for advisors to continue to get professional development and know what's happening in the industry outside of Drexel, and it's often very validating. We hear advisors from different parts of the university say, we're already doing that. I'm so excited that we're working proactively in this way. That's a great idea. Can we do this here? And knowing that we have that, again, continuous and constant feedback loop of what's going on outside. We also, because we are pulling centralized services together, we have an idea of what's coming up. So we're able to take trainings that would make sense for not just the operational piece of advising, but that humanistic piece of advising. And that's really showcased in a training series we did last year called Student Success Champions. You might see these pennants hanging around some people's offices at Drexel. And what we're able to do there is look at the metacognitive skills of working with students, look at wellness type skills. So when we're working with our students most at risk for not retaining, advisors were equipped with their relational skills and the institutional knowledge to go about that. And a lot of these ideas come out of meetings with our advising leadership team. And that is the Director of Student Services or similar labeled roles across the university. Every college has an advising lead, and we meet with them bi-weekly, along with some other folks in student services and student support roles, so that we can get an idea of what's happening and continue communication. All our notes from that meeting are posted into the Advising Hub as a continuous way to educate everyone and create extreme transparency about what we're doing and what we're thinking in advising. And the final thing I want to talk about is some of the support that we give to students directly. I'm not going into all of these for time purposes, but just very briefly, I'm going to talk more about our academic success plans, which is really a shining star in what we're doing. But our early warning system, Gateway courses, many of you are probably familiar with that. It's our program to leverage predictive analytics to support our first-year students and their ability to be retained and our ability to reach out to them proactively and make sure that if something is going wrong, we can create a change in their experience and leverage the support that we have at Drexel and bring them closer to those resources. We also do a lot of centralized communication, and we couldn't do that without Ryan Wall and UMAC and our friends in IT and the portal team. Often, Aaron is posting messages within the announcements section of the Drexel One portal about things all students need to know to be successful, right? If you're looking at a response to intervention model for those in social psych experiences here, you need to have a certain amount of information to be successful and navigate your world, right? For us as employees, we need to know having your swipe allows you to get into every building. If you didn't know that, you are done for if you're coming to campus. Similar to our students, there's some things about managing their academics that everyone needs to know that we can pull out, right? When is add drop? When is the withdraw deadline? Where are services, those just-in-time communications? We were able to pull those and move them out. We also have more specific messaging that we send to students, students with incomplete grades, students who have said, I withdrew from a class and I need more help, where do I go? We're able to reach out and create, again, a soft landing for students who need a little bit more support to be successful here. But really what I want to lean into is some of the work that we are continuing to expand on, which is our academic success plans. During COVID, we moved everything online, and with that, we learned a lot about our experiences and what we could do better and what we can continue to facilitate. From here, you can see a little chart from Tableau. 41.7% of our students who earned less than a 2.0 in their first term of enrollment here retain. So that says our students who have either been dismissed or on academic probation are at extreme risk for not retaining to graduation. A great place to start for an intervention, and that's what we did. So we did a pretty big amount of research in the field of academic recovery, again, thanks to Aaron Lasky, and we did some research from our peer and aspirant institutions of what are we doing when it comes to serving a really at-risk population. And we were able to come up, again, with the help of academic information systems and our partners in the college, our students who've been on academic probation, our advisors who have the most students on academic probation, to really come together and create a process that works well, and we've been running it for about 6 terms now. So we partnered with the registrar's office, and we have more robust messaging of what a student on academic probation needs to do in terms of what does the university say is the policy, and then with the portal team to complete plans, and then AAS helped us to put all of this information in Banner in a very nice FERPA protected way, so only the people who need to look at this are seeing this, with questions and opportunities to reflect on your experience, because we're learning from academic literature here. The students fill this out, the advisors are able to manage this in a not too time-intensive way, because tracking all of these students can become really tricky. So AAS helped us to build dashboards, and all of this is to say that what we're able to do is create an opportunity that's not just paperwork, but is transformational. Something that moves a student from, I have to do this thing because I'm told to do this thing, to I'm able to reflect on my experience. I'm able to look at my goals in the Drexel One portal every time I log into the academic tab to access my BB Learn coursework and say, oh yeah, I remember I wanted to improve my communication skills. I wanted to become better at time management. Yep, let me think about that in week 7 and in week 8, not just week 1 when I had this meeting. And finally, one of the best parts of this is it came along when the ARC was really formed, and Rebecca Weidensall helped us to pull together all of our referrals and make sure that the people receiving referrals, all those with little asterisks, were getting warm connections to students. Every time an advisor hits a button that says you were referred to one of these places, these offices get an email, and then outreach happens to the student. So we know that it's not just on the advisor, it's not just on the faculty member, it's not just on the student to find these resources. We've all come together for this, and that's really what ICA loves to do, is work on these types of projects where we're able to partner with different people from around the university to make a better student experience, and often it's facilitated through academic advising. So my ask to you is, if you see something that is a pain point to students and you see it over and over again and you're just like, man, I wish that could be better, please reach out to us. We're happy to help you with those problems as you see them, because it's important to us that we work with you to retain our students, because that's all what we want to do here. And I feel like we're really in a privileged place because we are with people who want to change their lives, so we might as well make it good for them while they're here. I'm going to turn over to Giuseppe. And thank you, everyone.
Okay. Hello, everyone. It's great to see everyone. I think I know a lot of people, either working with them face-to-face or in emails. I would like to say that we've saved the best for last, but that was obviously an inaccurate statement, because I work with such wonderful people, and I'm very fortunate to actually work with such incredible colleagues on a regular basis under the stellar leadership of Dawn Medley. So thank you. I also want to say that I've been here a long time. So I know Nadine said she was 12 when her experience had it. So I'd like to say probably I was dropped off as a baby on the front steps of the main building and said, we'll work for food and shelter. So I've been at the institution for a long period of time. I've been in several roles. I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of different people. I am also a lifelong learner, so I dabble in a lot of academic credentials where I've worked with a lot of colleges. So I believe in the product that we have, which is, the curriculum and the structure, and I really enjoy learning. So our mission actually is to support the academic goals of the university through the process of enhancement while adhering to enforcing Drexel's academic policies. We uphold the integrity of the institution by maintaining the accuracy of every student's academic record with the assurance that they receive exemplary customer service while working within the framework of FERPA. So FERPA is a really important standard, but sometimes people, registrars alike, tend to use FERPA in negative ways, when sometimes FERPA actually is a way to protect the integrity and the privacy of a student record. So by saying that, we'll cover that a little bit later, but when we say every student's record, according to Drexel's fact book from, as the end of December, the overall enrollment is 21,153, I think. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. I like to walk around. Sorry that. Okay. No problem. Sorry, people online. So I would say that our office, the University Registrar's Office, touches both directly or indirectly those student records at any one time or multiple times. So a lot of the processes that we do are actually 4 quarters, soon to be maybe 3 semesters, but with academic transformation. So I couldn't do all of this without the incredible and amazing staff that I have. So I would like to say that I can show their pictures and talk about 16, 15 people, but I'll give a high-level overview. The University Registrar's Office is a centralized office. That means that there's not individual registrars in each of the colleges and schools, and we have a universal way of applying consistency, accuracy, and equity across academic records and academic policies. Our academic services team is led by Amy Nickerson, and she is the guru of course scheduling, catalog. She works with her team to effortlessly, 4 quarters, to ensure the accuracy of the term-semester schedule, that room assignments are accurate, that we have final exam scheduling, all while adhering within the framework of the catalog. Dennis Callahan actually is my associate registrar for the College of Medicine. He works with all things College of Medicine. Sean Riley, who's here, and I won't embarrass him, is actually the king of academic records. He does everything with academic records, and sometimes you'll actually see an email at 1:58 a.m. And so Sean is effortlessly working on ensuring the accuracy and integrity of these records. And Terry Brittenstein, who is the graduation commencement queen, who ensures effortlessly that every single DegreeWorks audit has a green check mark. So if you've ever gotten a call from Terry that says the audit's missing a check mark, you know that she takes her job extremely seriously. So I couldn't do it without this amazing team and all of the individuals that support the leaders of the University Registrar's Office. But the most important part is our division is composed of academic services, which is everything from catalog to term-semester schedule to room instructional space allocation, final exam scheduling, all things that ensure the accuracy of the registration record and leads to the academic record. Academic records is everything academic records, from registration all the way up to commencement. So I know that a lot of times the fallacy is that the University Registrar's Office or Registrar's Office, all they do is registration, even though it's inherently part of the title of sorts. We do a lot more than just registration. That's a critical part of what we do, but you'll learn a lot of other things as we move along. So I'm not going to go over all of these because obviously this is not an exhaustive list of the things that we do, but we manage university-wide registration processes and protocols, which include all first-year scheduling. So we work collaboratively with colleges and schools and our wonderful partners in AIS, in ICA, across the divisions, within our divisions, and we really ensure that a student actually has, an incoming student, first-year student has the schedule while working with placement exam management, but that comes a little later. We oversee federal student enrollment reporting standards. We also oversee and manage all late registration appeals at the undergraduate level. We support the academic calendars, which actually, if you've ever seen a movie with like time-lapse photography where they're like picking off the months, I feel like that's like a day in my life because you actually see like January, and they move so fast, and imagine that happening like 4 times a year. So we're always in date-driven, we're time-driven, but sometimes when you're date-driven and time-driven, you have to step out and see the forest for the trees because there's more than deadlines. Like, these impact students' lives and, their success. We also manage faculty grade submission, the processes and the protocols. We work collaboratively with our systems partners. Mary Quigley's team, they do an amazing job. We ensure that all upgrades are done, testing, working with AIS, so that we actually can ensure the accuracy of the records. We also manage all academic records as stated, and we manage academic standings and reinstatements with our university-wide stakeholders, working very closely with ICA and the colleges and the schools to ensure that the students have the right standings and the equity of their appeals and reinstatements. This is a little bit more about the academic records team. The Family Education Rights and Privacy Act is a structure and it is a framework for us, but it isn't something that defines us to always say no. We really have to ensure the academic integrity and the security and equity are paramount. I work very closely with the Office of Compliance and OGC, which is the Office of General Counsel, to ensure the integrity and security of every academic record. And when there's a FERPA violation, because since I am the university FERPA officer, guess who gets the call if someone violates FERPA? Yeah. No, I wish. Michelle, you can take it if you want to. Unfortunately, we'll get a call and we have to work collaboratively to ensure, what was done and educate. And it's a great opportunity to work with constituencies to educate them on FERPA, but most importantly, for the accuracy and privacy of students' records. We manage the academic credentials process. I don't know if any of you have actually who have graduated have ever applied to get a certified electronic diploma. Has anyone ever heard of the certified electronic diploma? Okay, wonderful. Aaron has. Thank you, Aaron. And that is a new technology that we have. We're constantly integrating and learning technologies to see how academic records evolves through this process. We're also exploring things like digital wallets. What does that mean? So keeping your pulse on academic records management doesn't always go back to the old stories of registrars and file cabinets that I remember I won't tell you the years, but I remember many years ago working in colleges and schools and actually in the registrar's office where we kept paper files. They're all digital and they allow for a wide variety of usage. We assist with graduation planning with university-wide stakeholders, and we also influence academic policy creation and updates with all university-wide stakeholders, including the Office of the Provost, with ICA, a variety of constituencies, to ensure that the accuracy of not only the record is influenced by policies that are actually relevant in this time period. So the academic services team uses the university catalog structure, which guides all the discussions and creates the framework. They work with university-wide stakeholders for course catalog accuracy, course scheduling, instructional space allocation to support the academic mission. We also are on many councils related to utilizing academic instructional space in a way that makes sense and ensuring that we're also optimizing that space. They also work with managing the student placement exam process, also first-year scheduling, and works with academic departments regarding demand scheduling and demand-based scheduling and what does that mean, and they manage the final exam process. So what OUR does on a consistent basis is flexibility. We find ways, yes, to say yes, especially within the framework of FERPA and through the academic student's life cycle. We collaborate with other university-wide stakeholders in moving students toward alumni status. As we also have many touch points during the enrollment management funnel that actually happen pre-matriculation, which also help for students to matriculate. Going back to Helen's slides and a variety of that funnel. So we also believe in outlining procedures and training for support, working with all our stakeholders on a collaborative basis. We also believe in overall transparency with all academic policies and procedures. Academic policies are meant to support and benefit students for them to achieve success. They're not supposed to be barriers or hindrance for them. And as we move with academic transformation, we are reviewing policies that are applicable and not applicable anymore. We are always student, faculty, and administration friendly. So I'd like to give you a real-world example of this, the culmination of this. Sometime, I think it was in June, I remember. I remember getting a call that, UArts was closing and we needed to develop a teach out. And, Dawn had asked me, do we have a teach out? And I said, no, I don't think we do. And, things started moving really quickly and in a fast pace. So this is a good example of the agile nature and creative and strategies that we are flexible with doing. So Drexel had never done this before. We worked really collaboratively with the colleges. Shout outs to Westfall, COAS, and Goodwin to understand and create solutions for curricular structures and to use something called prior learning assessments, or PLA. These are ways where you can creatively apply things outside of an academic structure, students' experiences or knowledge, in a way to gain academic credit. We created pathways working with the colleges, working with ICA, working with advisors, to actually create these pathways and articulations that had never existed before. There are 98 students from this teach-out that are currently enrolled today, and actually 7 have graduated since this was originated. So we actually said yes, where others may have said no. But I want to raise a point to this. We're actually utilizing this not as a one-off, but finding ways of how PLA could work across the institution, using academic transformation, working with the Goodwin College, working with the School of Ed, working with Arts and Sciences. We've actually successfully applied some models in School of Ed. We are also in Arts and Sciences, and we're working with Goodwin to ensure that we can use this and leverage it beyond the teach-outs. And also, when another teach-out comes along, we'll be well prepared. With that being said, that is all I have. Thank you very much.
So is this one? Oh, look at that. John's on top of it back there. So we'll have a few for some questions, and then, as I promised, the subject matter experts will be available in person to answer individual questions or talk about things that may be pressing for you. I want to add just a couple caveats to some things that have been said. One is Giuseppe glossed over the prior learning assessment work that he did, that he and his team did for the UArts folks. So Drexel had never done a teach-out before. And so I also want to give a shout out, because as we were doing this work, building the communication, I mean, I had a Saturday meeting with Westfall and faculty, and they were trying to be really adaptive and really supportive of students, and just, figuring out, like, they had 2D animation, but we had 3D, and how was all that going to work together? That was just basically an exemplar. It was an exemplar for what Drexel brings to the table. So when we go back to the value proposition of what a Drexel education is, y'all rushed to support students who were going through probably the most traumatic experience they'd ever had in their life, right? So their institution closed, and they didn't know what to do or where to go or where to turn. And so all of the support services that we had were mobilized to support students that weren't even ours. And so we were having conversations. I mean, I was talking to students about financial aid who were actually making choices to go to other institutions. And so we just stepped into our expertise in the profession, whether or not those students were actually going to enroll at Drexel. And so sometimes it's about just making sure that the student finds the right fit. And we had a lot of those students who came to us, some who were out on internship in the summer, scheduled to do that, and then they were going to graduate. All right, so they weren't really ever going to be our students, but we stepped up to make sure that they were going to have a place to graduate and a place to know that they had somebody supporting them. And so that was a lot of the work that was happening with PLA. And we're prepared now. So Jackie Hopkins actually put together a whole running list and document of everything we did, because as an institution, when Tom talks to you about the fact that we're looking at trends and things that may happen, we believe that there will be other institutions that close over the course of the next 5 to 10 years. So we will be called upon by Middle States or other institutions to support teach-outs again. Never again will we not have a playbook, right? So now we have a playbook. We know what worked before. We know what lessons we learned, and we'll be able to implement that and move forward. So that's one of the things that really demonstrates the fact that we're focused on being agile, student-ready, and student-supporting. But the other thing that I wanted to say is we're also looking to the future. So as we're moving forward with accepting of credits and the evaluation of transfer credits, we're also looking to see what does that mean for high school students who are taking early college credit? What does that mean for adults who come to us with 3 and 4 transcripts from other institutions? How we can assemble that information and put those students on a degree path that makes sense for them. And so that's part of the work. So our work has really moved from being linear to almost looping back and being circular and continuing, because that's the pattern we're seeing with enrollment as we go forward in the higher ed market, that students are not coming in and taking a degree, finishing in 4 years, going out, getting a job, and never re-entering higher ed. That's not the pattern we see, and so that's not the pattern that we can support anymore. We need to be constantly ready for those students who are entering, exiting, returning, maybe to us or to another institution, and then also wanting to come back and re-educate themselves. And so one of the things we talk about, it's not just educating students for their first job anymore, right? Most students will change careers multiple times, and so us helping them learn and be flexible and know where to go and seek that information is really where I think that we're going to have our strengths. And that's where I think really back to that experiential learning is going to be really strong. So with that, we will end our first ever, notice I didn't say first annual because I'm an English major and I know that's wrong. So our first ever Enrollment Management Summit. As I said, we will be available. Everybody online, you have our email addresses. We welcome additional interaction and anything that we can do to support you all out clear across campus with how we can make sure that we are student ready and always student focused. But thanks for spending your afternoon with us. I truly, truly appreciate it.